My husband Camille apologized to me in such a Philippines manner, saying he got his mistress pregnant and we needed to break up. I was dumbfounded, and my affection for him ran out 6 months ago. Is the mistress someone I know? I asked. Yeah, it's Kyra. Remember meeting her again at Alice's wedding reception. Since then, my husband seemed completely unashamed. Alice's wedding was the year before last, so you've been cheating for over a year. Alice was a college classmate, and Kyra was a junior 2 years behind me. She was in the same research group as Alice, and we played tennis together in college, so I remember her well. She was nicknamed Little Devil behind her back and was quite famous in a way. Huh. Oh, is that so? Time flies when you get older. My husband just laughed it off. What on earth was he thinking? I can't understand him at all. I'm Viola, 30 years old. I met my husband in the college tennis club despite him being 5 years older at 35. He often showed up as an alumnus who loved happy hours, had lots of friends, and was friendly with everyone. He took great care of freshmen and was kind, but I later realized it was limited to girls after we started dating. I cried many times due to his cheating habits back then, but I loved him and married him right after graduation. But once I started working, I got to know the real him, or rather, his useless side. He frequently appeared in the tennis club's clubhouse, acting all high and mighty with the juniors because he was completely ignored by his peers. The truth was he was so incompetent at his job that he wasn't given any serious responsibilities. Even now, there's no prospect of a raise or promotion. He's just a pretentious good-for-nothing who can't do his job or household chores. I tried various things to change him after we got married, but his refusal to change made me give up. The reason I had to divorce him wasn't just that work was busy and it was a hassle, but also because his parents were good people, a reason that had nothing to do with my husband himself. So look, we need to split up quickly because of the baby coming. You can have this apartment, and I'll leave. That's the end of it, okay? I was taken aback by his careless words and my husband's sly grin. What? No way. Let's part ways cleanly. This is not a good opportunity. As I neared my 40s, I started wanting a child. I had graduated college and started working as a full-time employee. I found myself in a situation where I was earning more than my husband, and my company offered excellent parental and maternity leave benefits. I was ready to start a family, but despite our efforts, it just wasn't happening, and it broke my heart. The love I once felt for my husband had dwindled away, especially after discovering his affair and the news that he got the other woman pregnant. I was determined to cleanly and completely end the relationship. What infuriated me even more was his lack of remorse. Instead of apologizing, he simply voiced his needs and demands. It was evident that it was time to put an end to this unpleasant relationship that had dragged on for years. We would involve a lawyer, ask for compensation, and divide our property. And of course, we would expect something from Kyra as well. However, when I voiced my concerns about the financial aspect, my husband callously suggested that I take on the debt myself since it was his affair that caused the separation. When I glared at him, he relented, admitting that he might need his father's help to cover the expenses. I proceeded with the divorce proceedings and hired a lawyer. Despite multiple calls from my in-laws pleading with me to reconsider, I remained steadfast in my decision. Even my father-in-law broke down in tears, acknowledging that if I left, it would spell the end for him. My mother-in-law begged me to reconsider, expressing her love for me like her own daughter. But even they understood once I laid bare the truth about my husband's constant infidelity and laziness. Finally, they apologized profusely, hanging their heads in shame. They even paid the compensation in a lump sum on behalf of my husband, who had no savings of his own. They made him promise never to ask for their help again and to repay them promptly. I still can't fathom how such a careless and irresponsible man could come from parents as decent and responsible as his. I decided to retreat to my parents' house. The divorce proceedings, which I had anticipated as a hassle, wrapped up faster than I expected. Returning to my recently relocated family home, 6 months flew by. I found myself consumed by work on weekdays and occupied with household chores on weekends, leaving little room to dwell on my ex-husband. Then, out of the blue, my best friend Alice called, seething with anger from the moment she started speaking. Viola, did you know your ex-husband Camille and Kyra? They're living it up in a new high-rise apartment, flaunting their wealth everywhere. Kyra even had the audacity to invite me to her baby shower party. The presents alone cost over $100, and there's a $100 participation fee. It's outrageous, isn't it? She exclaimed. I was taken aback by the news. I hadn't realized that Kyra had given birth, let alone why she would reach out to Alice. Both my ex-husband and Kyra were well aware that Alice was my best friend. Why would Kyra even extend an invitation to her, knowing Alice would undoubtedly relay everything to me? When I tentatively mentioned this to Alice, her anger escalated even further. She did it deliberately, Viola. Deliberately. That awful woman had the nerve to tell me she's so happy now, thanks to Viola breaking up with Camille. Can you believe her audacity? She's the worst kind of person. I want to put her in her place somehow. Alice raged. That nickname from our college days resurfaced in my mind. Kara was always known as the little devil, stirring up trouble among seemingly happy couples. Even when relationships were strained because of her involvement, she remained composed, wearing a facade of innocence. If a couple splits up just because someone else shows interest, it wasn't true love to begin with, right? They would have broken up eventually anyway, so what's the harm? She'd say, her words dripping with sugary sweetness, all the while smirking knowingly. I felt a pang of pity for Kyra, realizing she might never have experienced genuine love. Despite this, I knew better than to involve myself with her, so I made the conscious decision to keep my distance, at least for the time being. Kara didn't matter much to me. There was something else that demanded my attention. Alice. There's only one newly constructed high-rise apartment building, right? Have you heard anything about them moving in? I asked Alice, seeking any information she might have. I've never met them, Alice quickly replied, but apparently it was very recent. They'd been boasting about securing a spot. Fortunately, someone who had bought one of the units had to relocate for work and put it back on the market without moving in. Ah, it makes sense, I nodded, processing the information. So, your moving day is Sunday, right? The baby shower party is on Saturday. You'll only need to be cautious for one day. There are multiple elevators, and they might use different entrances. You're right, we haven't crossed paths so far, so it should be fine. Alice concurred. We live together, but unexpected situations can still arise. As fate would have it, an unexpected situation did indeed unfold on Saturday. While waiting for the elevator on the first floor, I found myself face to face with my ex-husband and Kyra as they stepped out of the elevator. Hey, Viola, what are you doing here? My ex-husband spoke first, with Kyra chiming in. Viola, are you here to celebrate with us? You must be eager to see our adorable baby, aren't you? Kyra's voice was cheerful, her smile radiant, but her eyes betrayed a different story. They held no hint of amusement. What? Seriously, did you come to crash the party without an invitation? My ex-husband interjected, his tone incredulous. To scope out the high-rise apartment or catch a glimpse of our little prince. The casual reference to the baby as both baby and prince grated on my nerves. That's not it, I retorted coolly. I was just waiting for the elevator. I responded, consciously switching to a polite tone midway through the conversation. Camille was now my ex, essentially a stranger, and I didn't want to create a scene. Ha, so you're planning to visit my house after all? Camille remarked with a hint of amusement. You're so silly, Viola. Stop being stubborn. Perhaps you're just envious of our luxurious high-rise apartment and our adorable little prince. Do you still harbor feelings for me? Are you feeling lonely and longing to see me again? Camille, that's not acceptable, I interjected firmly. Regardless of any lingering emotions you think I may have, you're now married to Kyra. It's inappropriate for me to barge into your home uninvited. And as for jealousy, Kyra, you're mistaken. But I appreciate your concern. Camille continued, dismissing my words. Sorry, Viola, but Kyra and our son are our top priorities now. You're not welcome here. As I listened to their conversation, I couldn't help but feel perplexed. It had been 6 months since I last saw my ex-husband, and yet his mindset remained as irrational as ever. Kara's attitude was equally baffling. It dawned on me that my cheating ex-husband and his new partner were a perfect match in their own peculiar way. Reflecting on it, I regretted wasting my precious 20s on Camille. I'm utterly ashamed of my past with Camille, wishing to bury those memories deep in darkness. If only I had ended things sooner without making excuses, I wouldn't have to endure this nonsense from my ex-husband and his partner. My words seemed to strike a nerve with Camille, who retorted, What's that? You're really lacking charm. Learn from Kyra. Even her jealousy is endearing. She's just given birth, yet she still takes the effort to look stylish for me. Don't you find her admirable? Not at all embarrassed, I replied calmly. I was simply going to the grocery store. I was dressed in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, clean and presentable. That's the problem. I grew tired of your simplicity. Camille snapped. Enough already. We have nothing to do with each other. Just go home. Annoyed by his dismissive tone, I retorted, actually, this is my home. Seeing their disbelief, I had to explain. I've been living with my parents in this high-rise apartment for 6 months now. My father was approached by salespeople when talks of selling the land he owns arose. They suggested that living in a high-rise would be more convenient, especially as he's getting older. While it's not entirely our land, we received a substantial sum from selling it. During negotiations, we were able to move into one of the higher floors for much less than market value. Camille was taken aback. You're landowners with that much money. If I had known, I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce. Give me back the compensation money. There's no need for a property settlement, I replied firmly. The compensation was a result of your affair, and the property settlement was a matter between us as a married couple. As I spoke, I noticed Kyra mumbling to herself, her silence speaking volumes. I caught it. I can't believe Viola is living in a high-rise. I thought I had totally won, Kyra exclaimed, shooting me a glare. But Viola, you don't have a baby or a loving partner, do you? I haven't lost yet. Look, Kyra, I was never competing with you, I replied calmly. In fact, I'm thankful to you for giving me the opportunity to break up with Camille. Oh, and I'm moving out of my house tomorrow, so I don't think we'll see each other again. What? Why? You just moved into a high-rise, they both exclaimed in surprise. I shrugged, explaining, maybe it's a matter of different values. It just wasn't a good fit for my family. I found living in a high-rise unsuitable for hanging laundry outside. There are no balconies on the higher floors for safety, and only some windows can be opened. It wasn't suitable for my mother and me, who preferred drying laundry and bedding in natural sunlight and wind without using a dryer. Plus, the intense sunlight made it too hot even with the air conditioning on. The building also shakes quite a bit during even a magnitude 3 earthquake. It's designed to sway to prevent collapse, and the higher floors shake more. It was terrifying. Most stressful of all was the daily elevator ride. It gets crowded during the morning commute, and it takes time since it stops on each floor. The advertised 3-minute walk from the station felt much longer in the elevator. We were too bothered by the drawbacks unique to high-rise living, so we decided to move to a regular house with a garden. After all, luckily, our apartment sold quickly at almost the same price we bought it for. As I finished explaining, both my ex-husband and Kyra grinned. So we'll never see each other again. So, a high-rise wasn't suitable for commoners like you. It's more suited for an elite celebrity family like mine, Kyra remarked sarcastically. I couldn't comprehend how he arrived at that conclusion, but one thing became abundantly clear. What I grew to despise and ultimately gave up on was that facet of you, pretentiousness without substance, and unwillingness to change or exert any effort. I reached my breaking point with you, but it's all right now. You're beyond repair, so goodbye, I repeated, echoing my ex-husband's own words back to him. Stepping into the just-arrived elevator, I glanced at Kyra, who was glaring at both my astonished ex-husband and me. Right before the doors closed, I added one final remark. By the way, are you sure the child is truly yours? My ex-husband looked utterly perplexed, prompting me to clarify. I mean exactly what I said, right, Kyra? You understand what I'm implying, don't you? As the doors closed, I didn't know what transpired next in reality. However, during our struggle to conceive, I underwent tests at the gynecologist's, which revealed no issues on my end. I began to suspect the problem might lie with my husband, but he adamantly refused to get tested. Hence, I delivered that incendiary parting shot. Later, I heard from a mutual friend who attended Kyra's baby shower. Despite boasting about their high-rise lifestyle, my ex-husband and Kyra were residing on the 3rd floor. Additionally, despite their extravagant demands for gifts and participation fees, only cheap snacks from the grocery store were served. When a friend voiced a soft complaint, Kyra reportedly exploded, demanding gratitude for the chance to see her baby up close and insisting on payment. This sparked a heated argument between my ex-husband and Kyra, leaving their gathering in disarray. Thanks in part to my earlier cryptic remark, it was revealed that my ex-husband and Kyra had moved into a high-rise but were struggling financially, attempting to swindle money from their friends through fabricated reasons. Their deceit caused outrage among their friends, who promptly left. Meanwhile, my family and I settled into a single-family home with a garden where I recently welcomed an adorable kitten. Our former high-rise was embroiled in controversy due to significant defects and illegal construction methods, making it unsellable. Reflecting on our situation, we realized we were unexpectedly fortunate. Now, I find solace in my severed ties with my ex-husband and cherish the tranquility of my peaceful days. As I hang the laundry on a sunny afternoon, my kitten sometimes curls up on the clothes, its adorable sleeping face bringing me a sense of contentment. Today, like many others, was a good day.
My in-laws have moved to a new designer apartment and are living freely. One morning, my father-in-law scolded me for not being able to see her husband off. Why didn't you see your husband off to work? What were you thinking? I got a call for work and just couldn't see him off. When I answered, my mother-in-law gave me a sarcastic smile. You know, I always say that just drying at home is not a job. You're like a parasite. What? My father-in-law also put me under pressure. I'm sure our son, who works well outside the home, earns more. You should respect your husband and support him more, you useless wife. I couldn't stand their words anymore. Why do my in-laws, who are living in my house without paying any living expenses, have to abuse me so much? When I said, I cannot respect my husband, my mother-in-law looked shocked. Well, I can't believe it. Someone who talks like that isn't family. A stranger should leave. That's right. We'll live here with our son. You leave. We can pay a rent of $300. I was momentarily stunned. $300 a month for rent? What are these people talking about? But having been spoken to like this, I decided not to care about what happens next. Fine, I'll leave. Afterward, they would face a hard time. My name is Kathy Brown, a 30-year-old working from home. I am working as a graphic designer. My business is doing well, and frankly, I earn quite a good income. My husband, Tom, is a regular office worker, and we've been married for 3 years. Even after marriage, he would help with household chores if I asked. But he seems to tell his male friends that household chores are a woman's job, so I let my wife do it. He has a vain side. I only realized this after getting married. Tom and I used to live in a regular rental apartment, but one day, there was a water leak from the floor above. We tried to move the furniture and appliances to save them, but some were damaged or became unusable. After discussions with the landlord, it was decided that they would be able to move after receiving a small amount of compensation. Hey, Kathy, why don't we move here next? Tom happily said, showing me the website of a 4-route designer's apartment near the station with a rent of $3,000. Our rent used to be $1,200, more than double the amount. I'd rather save the money for our future children. I've always wanted to live in a house like this. If we combine our incomes, living here wouldn't be difficult, right? But if you live in such a sophisticated place, you might get more motivation for work. If it's too much, we can move somewhere else. Please. I couldn't refuse after hearing that. And we didn't have the leisure to look for a house slowly. Following Tam's suggestion, I started to look forward to living in a stylish home and agreed to sign the contract in his name and help with the payments. So, we moved to the new designer's apartment. The apartment was truly beautiful and stylish. Indeed, it did boost my motivation for work. However, even while enjoying this life, I had concerns. Because of my worries was my in-laws, who had become closer due to the move. My father-in-law, Dan, who had just turned 60, took early retirement and was at home every day. My mother-in-law, Helen, had never worked and was a housewife. Frankly, my relationship with my in-laws was not good. For example, when I recently visited their apartment, Tom, glad you could make it. Come on in, greeted Tam's parents with smiles, completely ignoring me standing beside him. Hello, father or mother. As I hesitantly greeted them, my mother-in-law glared at me. Oh, Kathy, you were here? My in-laws only need their son, whom they love, and it seems they don't need me at all. As I was about to sit down doing nothing, my father-in-law said, Hey, make some snacks for the drinks. It was still daytime, and yet my father-in-law ordered me around so arrogantly. Looking at my mother-in-law, she was busy taking photos with Tom for social media, seemingly unconcerned. She was in her 50s and obsessed with social media, apparently having a decent number of followers. I knew her account and saw her constantly posting pictures of luxury brands and accessories, despite living in a cheap apartment. I wondered how she managed that, but it turned out she was registered with a luxury brand rental service, making it look like she owned these items. Maybe Tom inherited his pretentious personality from his mother. Eventually, I stood up and made some snacks for my father-in-law. What's this? The taste is too bland to be a snack, he complained while eating the food I had made. Hearing that, My mother-in-law looked at me and said, "You really can't do anything, can you?" Haha. Poor Tom, having such a useless wife. All the while, my husband pretended not to hear. Since the beginning of our marriage, he had always wanted to please his parents. Though we moved and became closer, we were still living separately. I thought it best not to involve myself too much with them. That's what I had been thinking. A month after Tom and I moved, an incident happened on a day approaching our wedding anniversary. My wedding anniversary was just approaching, so I bought a lot of ingredients to have a small celebration at home and was about to toast. The door opened without the entrance intercom ringing. Father, mother, today is your wedding anniversary celebration, right? That's why we came. I couldn't believe Tom's words, but he happily invited them in. Before I could ponder why the door had opened on its own, I was startled by the sight of my in-laws in the entrance, carrying large bags. Father, mother, what's going on? And those big bags. Ignoring me, my mother-in-law entered the house and exclaimed, "Oh, the stylishness of a designer's apartment is wonderful. Living in such a fabulous home is like a dream." What? Then my father-in-law added, "Didn't Tom tell you? We've given up the apartment and our stuff will be here tomorrow. From today, you'll take proper care of us, as a wife should." Wait, what are you talking about, Tom? When I looked at Tom, he explained with a frown, "Actually, it was time to renew my parents' apartment lease. We have unused rooms here, so I thought, why not live together?" What? When my mother-in-law saw my reaction, she said to me with a scared look on her face, "What's with that face? Do you have a problem with us living here?" That's right. That's right. What's the complaint? From today, this is our home. Such. And so, from this day on, I was forced to live with my in-laws. Life afterwards was a continuous struggle. My father-in-law gave me orders in an overbearing manner, forcing me to buy alcohol and doing chores. There was even a time when he threw laundry in my face. It seems that to my father-in-law, I was nothing more than a servant. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law, as if to boast about living here, took pictures of the apartment and posted them on social media with captions like "our new home." They started using my clothes and shoes without permission, escalating their show-off behavior even further. Whenever I tried to speak up, both of them would say things that denied my personality. I was utterly exhausted by these daily occurrences. "The way your father and mother treat me is too awful." I complained to my husband Tom when he returned from work, but he just placated me without much thought. I was feeling discontent, not just with my in-laws who were the source of my stress, but also with Tom, who wouldn't take me seriously. One day, when I was almost at my mental limit, Tom came home irritated in the middle of a weekday. "What's wrong, Tom? What happened?" "Today, my company told me that I would be transferred to an affiliated retail store. Transfer was just a word, but it turned out to be a layoff." While loosening his tie, Tom sat roughly on the sofa. "That's terrible. A transfer means things will get harder, won't it?" Tom replied grumpily. "No, I'm not accepting the transfer. I told them it must be some kind of joke. That's why I got angry and quit the company right now." What? I was shocked, but Tom looked as if it was the most natural thing. Of course, going to a retail store, my pride wouldn't allow it. Don't just decide things like that on your own. What about the rent for this place? If you had followed the company's orders and transferred, at least you wouldn't have lost your job. Even as I vented my anger at him, Tom said as if it was nothing, "Your income is nearly $10,000 a month, right? That should be enough to live on. So I'm counting on you for the living expenses and the monthly rent of $3,000. What? What are you talking about? And don't tell Dad and Mom about this. I don't want to worry them. Well, I plan to find a new job soon, so don't worry too much." I was really angry, but I couldn't just abandon my unemployed husband right away. From that day on, in addition to housework, I had to pay the living expenses and rent for 4 people by myself. As for Tom, he would leave the house every morning in a suit, trying not to let his parents realize he had quit his job. At first, I thought he was looking for a job, but he didn't return home all day. When I followed him, I found out he was gambling with his unemployment benefits. Even after a fierce argument, Tom didn't seem to change his mind. Instead, he started making sarcastic comments about me being busy with work. One day, while living such a life, Tom was arrogantly reading the newspaper at the dining table, dressed in his suit. I had been working until late at night, so I was rushing around since the morning. I managed to prepare breakfast for my late-rising in-laws and Tom, and while doing the dishes in the kitchen, my mother-in-law spoke to me in a displeased tone. "Kathy, this fried egg is too hard." "What?" I made it as usual though. Then, my father-in-law said, I only eat soft-boiled fried eggs. Make it again, now. What? Just as I was about to argue, a call came in from a client, so I answered the phone. Tom, perhaps jealous that I was busy, clicked his tongue, gave me a cold look, and left the house without eating his breakfast. Finally, when I hung up the phone, my in-laws were standing in front of me with crossed arms, looking puzzled. Father, mother, is there something you need? You need to get your act together. How could you not see off your husband when he's going to work? I answered timidly, despite being scared by my father-in-law's stern tone. I got a call for work. I couldn't see him off. Then my mother-in-law laughed derisively. You know, I always say that just drying at home is not a job. You're like a parasite. What? Father-in-law added pressure. Obviously, our son's income from working outside is better. Respect your husband more, you useless wife. Respect Tom, who quit his job on a whim and doesn't even try to find a new one. Why do I have to be berated so much by my in-laws who freeload in my house without contributing to expenses? I can't take it anymore. As my anger boiled over, I told them, you two wouldn't understand, but I cannot respect my husband. As I spoke loudly and clearly, my in-laws looked shocked, their faces turning increasingly red. Well, I can't believe it. Someone who talks like that isn't family. A stranger should leave. That's right. We'll live with our son, so you get out. We can pay about $300 for rent. I was momentarily dumbfounded. $300 for rent? What are these people talking about? The actual rent is 10 times that. $3,000, isn't it? However, having been spoken to like this, I decided not to care about what happens next. Understood. I will leave. Thus, I ignored my taunting in-laws, packed my belongings, and left the house. After that, I stayed in a weekly apartment. A few weeks later, my husband Tom suddenly called me. There were several missed calls, and reluctantly, I answered the phone. Tom wanted to meet and talk. I thought it was necessary to eventually speak with Tom, so I agreed. To my surprise, Tom arrived at the restaurant with his parents. Before I could ask about the situation, Tom hastily started speaking. Hey, Kathy, what do you mean by getting a divorce? I won't accept it. Don't you dare divorce me without my consent. Oh, you saw the divorce papers I sent. As I replied calmly, my in-laws glared at me. Meanwhile, Tom turned pale. I sighed and spoke to him. Without any consultation, your parents moved in and have been harassing and insulting me every day. You never listened to my complaints, did you? Such a thing for? What do you mean by such a thing? You don't understand how much I've suffered, do you? Tom faltered for a moment at my sharp words but retorted as if fighting back. Don't think you can just get a divorce for that. I won't agree to it. My in-laws seemed puzzled that Tom showed no signs of agreeing to the divorce. Tom, why don't you want to leave such a person? That's right. We said we could pay about $300 for rent, didn't we? We start a bill and we can afford that much. At their words, I couldn't help but laugh. My in-laws stared at me, puzzled. What's so funny? I see. The $300 bill was for the monthly parking fee. Haha. What? My in-laws looked shocked. My mother-in-law timidly whispered, Then, how much is the actual rent? I showed them the rent bill right then and there. $3,000. As my in-laws grew increasingly pale, I said to them, You said you'd pay the rent, right? Tom is the lessee, so good luck with that. Haha. As I spoke cheerfully, my father-in-law answered, trembling. Humph, Tom can pay that much, can he? Right, Tom? Tom, already pale, was turned to by everyone. As Tom remained silent, I decided to reveal the truth. This man is actually unemployed. How do you plan to pay $3,000 for rent? Haha, what? I explained Tam's situation to his astonished parents. How Tom had quit his job suddenly without any consultation a while ago, and that there was hardly any savings left. Really, Tom? My mother-in-law, in a fluster, asked Tom, who weakly nodded. Then my father-in-law, trembling, asked, So, how have you been paying the rent and living expenses until now? I've been paying you all with my income, which you all despised as paintings and parasites, right? Such. We didn't know that. My mother-in-law cried out hysterically. Then Tom began to apologize with his head on the table. Kathy, I'm sorry. Please come back. I can't live without you. What about your parents? They don't seem sorry, do they? As I said that, Tom strongly urged his parents to apologize. We are sorry. Watching them mutter tremblingly, I had already decided what to say next. I don't intend to come back, and I want a divorce. I will never forgive you two either. We will never meet again. So. Tom finally broke down in tears, and I left the place after witnessing his parents trembling. Afterward, I divorced Tom through a lawyer. Regarding the property division, I successfully received most of the assets as compensation for alimony, leaving Tom with almost nothing. Next, I exposed the actions of my in-laws on my social media account. As a result, my mother-in-law's account went up in flames, and she eventually had to delete her account. They could not continue living in a designer apartment whose monthly rent was $3,000, and they were kicked out for non-payment of rent. Eventually, they moved into a shabby apartment and started living together as a trio. Tom seemed to have found a new job, but with a lower salary than before, he couldn't support his parents. My father-in-law was forced to work in a factory to earn money, busy working all day long. My mother-in-law, having shut down her social media account, lost the energy to go outside. My father-in-law forced into hard labor, and Tom living with them as a single man. They are likely to continue living a harsh life. Meanwhile, after the divorce, I moved to a designer's apartment suitable for singles and started living alone. The stress decreased, my work progressed smoothly, and I recently started keeping a cat that I love. From now on, I intend to build my life positively. How could you act so bossy for only $300K payment? Back then, I heard shockingly unbelievable words from my eldest son's wife. The $300K she referred to was about the newly built apartment I had fully paid for. Having bought them a new apartment, why must I be subjected to such harsh words? Years ago, when my husband passed away, raising 2 children alone was incredibly challenging. Indeed, at that time, the economic bubble had burst and everything was in recession. It was a tough period. During those times, dual-income households were becoming common, but finding full-time jobs while raising children was especially challenging for women. Most women could only find part-time jobs. Despite these hardships, I managed to support our living and eventually purchased a new apartment for my eldest son and his wife. I decided to buy the apartment thinking about the challenges they might be facing. However, my eldest son's wife showed no gratitude and even criticized me. Hurt by her words, I conveyed my feelings to my eldest son, hoping he'd stand up for me. Even if your mother is treated this way, don't you consider my feelings? Why don't you say anything? But his response was far from what I expected. Jokingly, he said, "Mom, if you have so many complaints, how about stopping the payments?" I was deeply shocked by these words and decided to cut off financial assistance to them immediately. I get it. Since you've said so, I'll gladly stop the payments. My name is Kathy Smith. I'm turning 53 this year. I raised 2 sons, Mike, the eldest, and Simon, the youngest, all by myself. I got married at 20, and Mike was born 2 years later. 3 years after that, Simon was born. Back then, we were a very happy family, and everything was going well. My husband worked for a small to medium-sized company. Although he didn't earn a high salary, we creatively made the most of our days. I, being a housewife, would frequently check supermarket flyers and occasionally cycle to a neighboring town for sale items. Still, as payday approached, our wallet would get thin. It was evident from our meals, which would become simple and frugal before payday. Yet, our hearts were filled with joy, spending each day with our precious family. When Simon turned 3, although we wanted another child, my husband tragically died in an accident. I didn't have time to grieve. To support my children, I worked tirelessly every day. Back then, there weren't many dual-income families, and the only available work for a woman raising kids was low-paid part-time jobs. Though night jobs paid better, I resisted them as a mother raising elementary school kids. Being a non-regular employee meant no bonuses. We managed daily expenses, but unexpected costs were challenging. I managed to buy a school backpack for Mike, but by the time Simon started school, our finances were even tighter. Unable to buy him a new backpack, he got teased for using a hand-me-down, and his elder brother Mike became a target too for standing up for him. Desperate to increase income, I began an affiliate marketing side business using the computer of my late husband. I had little knowledge about it, but researched online, set up a blog, and added affiliate links. Could I earn money from something like this? Skeptical, I continued blogging. Surprisingly, my blog became popular, earning me the title Queen of Affiliate Marketing. To my astonishment, I started getting magazine interviews and seminar invitations, which increased my income. Thanks to this, I gradually overcame our financial difficulties. My sons grew up, especially Mike, made youthful mistakes, but we enjoyed our family time. However, as my income increased, I became complacent. I started attending more external activities and seminars. I often left home and gave my children more money. Go ahead and eat what you like. I'll be home late again today, dear. During my absence, Mike began to hang out with bad friends and occasionally caused problems. At such times, my second son, Simon, gave me some advice. Mom, you should stop giving Mike money so easily. His friends might be taking money from him. These words made me reflect upon the bond as a family. Mike and Simon, my two sons, were as different as night and day. After an incident involving a school backpack during his junior high days, Simon began to despise and avoid those who openly discriminated or bullied others. This experience shaped him into a kind and justice-driven young man. However, this sense of justice created a slight rift between Simon and Mike, especially when Simon couldn't understand why Mike, in his mid-20s, still wandered aimlessly without a stable job. Mike would find a job only to quit soon after, spending his days playing with friends. Concerned, Simon advised, Mike, you should find a proper job and lead a stable life. As a mother, it was hard for me to see my son like this. I introduced Mike to a publishing company through my connection, but he repeatedly missed work without notice and eventually resigned. This company had deep ties with my acquaintance, and I had published blog-related books through them. Filled with regret, I deeply apologized to them. Apologizing for an adult child's behavior made me feel very ashamed. I'm not good at being bossed around by others. That's why I want to start something on my own, Mike said. After that, he ventured into several businesses, all of which I funded, but they all failed. Particularly in a network marketing venture, Mike involved Simon selling products forcefully to Simon's friends. This led our family to apologize to many people. This incident completely soured the relationship between Mike and Simon. After this turmoil, Mike decided to marry a girlfriend he met through network marketing. I decided to support their new life, hoping marriage might bring him a sense of responsibility. I financed their new apartment and the establishment of a wine bar in New York City, which Mike wanted to open. However, the business struggled, and I kept having to cover losses. Every time I visited Mike's place, I saw his brother-in-law and his friends drinking. They were the main patrons, with few other customers. Mike clearly admired this brother-in-law, who always stood out. Seeing Mike joining them in drinking made me wonder. One day, when financially burdened, I consulted Simon. He offered to help and said, "Let me look into Mike's affairs. Just wait a bit." A week later, he accompanied me to Mike's bar. We once again saw them enjoying drinks. I kept pondering how to resolve this situation but couldn't find an answer. My feelings for my sons remained unchanged, and I wished to break this cycle. I hoped for Mike to lead a more stable life. I approached Mike slowly and said, "Mike, if things continue like this, I might have to close this little bar. I've helped in many ways, but I'm not doing charity." To my surprise, Mike's wife reacted more than Mike. Drunkenly, she slurred, "Why are you suddenly so serious? If you want more customers, why not promote the shop more or bring your friends? It's ridiculous to say you'll close just because you don't have customers." I felt something off about her words. "But when you came to ask me for financial support, didn't you promise that both you and Mike would work hard together? And yet, I see both of you drinking together. What does this mean?" Initially, communicating with my eldest son's wife was a bit awkward, but at that moment, I had something I desperately wanted to convey. Almost every day, I would see her and my brother-in-law cheerfully drinking together, and I couldn't help but wonder about their intentions. I couldn't resist asking her about it. I wasn't sure how she would respond, but instead, her brother answered, "Kathy, why are you bringing this up all of a sudden? We are co-owners of this shop, and if it fails, it will tarnish our reputation. To prevent that, we need your cooperation too. He replied with a hint of arrogance while relaxing in his chair. His response lacked a sense of responsibility and compassion as an adult and family member, and it sounded entirely careless to me. Then, as if to add insult to injury, Mike's wife chimed in. Kathy, are you struggling with how to spend money? If so, we can help you out a bit. I was irritated by her condescending remark, but I tried to control my emotions. However, I couldn't help but retort emotionally. Why would you say that? I've financially supported both this shop and your new apartment. I've provided ample assistance without any conditions, so why do I have to be spoken that way? I suddenly remembered the financial struggles and worries I had as a child. Just because I don't have money problems now doesn't mean I should forgive everything. I was questioning this perspective. Then Mike's wife said something outrageous to me. The amount for the apartment and the startup of this shop isn't that significant. Why are you so grateful for it? Or do you want us to be grateful to you? Her words deeply shocked me. How could they consider the money I had earnestly earned and provided them with as insignificant? Regardless of the amount, I was taken aback by their lack of gratitude. If that's how you feel, I'll stop my payments. Feeling upset, I decided to leave the shop with Simon. As we were leaving, I heard the eldest son's wife taunt from behind. What? Running away when your position gets worse? Such a coward. I had no desire to respond and left the shop. A few days later, I received a call from Mike and his wife asking me to visit their shop. After the previous incident, I felt foolish to continue financially supporting them, so I decided to halt all payments. As a result, their debts accumulated, and it seemed that Mike and his wife were getting numerous reminders about their unpaid bills. Though reluctant, I decided to respond to Mike's summons. When I told Simon about it, he assured me, "It's okay. I'll go with you." His words gave me courage, and we both headed to Mike's shop. Upon arrival, not only were Mike and his wife there, but surprisingly, his brother-in-law was present too. "Hello, Kathy. This is just a regular meeting, right? Why did you bring a strong backup?" His wife's brother teased upon seeing Simon. Hearing this, Mike clarified, "That's my brother." Since my family and Mike's brother-in-law hadn't properly met since Mike's wedding, he had probably forgotten about Simon. To that, Simon reintroduced himself. "Hello, everyone. I'm Simon Smith, Mike Smith's younger brother. I'm a lawyer." To Mary, Mike's wife, and Mr. Cata Brown, Mary's brother, "I have some serious matters to discuss. There are allegations of fraud and embezzlement against you." The room filled with an atmosphere of shock. Mike, especially, looked stunned and hurriedly questioned Simon. "Wait, Simon? Since when did you become a lawyer? You were still a student last time." Back when Mike was involved in a network business, Simon was still in high school. Since the incident, the brothers had grown distant and had hardly met. Thus, Mike seemed unaware of Simon's career path. Keeping his composure, Simon replied, "Yes, while we were distant, quite some time has passed. I graduated and became a lawyer. By the way, Mary, I looked into it, and it seems you haven't submitted a marriage registration with Mike. However, since you live in his apartment and work at the shop his mother supported, legally, you're pretty much like a married couple, aren't you?" Hearing this, Mike turned to Mary in astonishment. "Huh? Mary, haven't you submitted the marriage registration yet? I remember you handed it to me, saying you'll take it to the city hall." "What's going on?" Mike confronted her. Mary remained silent, wearing a slightly troubled expression. Then Simon continued, "Furthermore, Mr. Brown, you and Mary have been close friends since childhood, often staying at his house. Even now, you visit several times a week. What does this mean? Are you implying that you aren't siblings? If you have a romantic relationship, that's bigamy, right?" Hearing this, Mike exclaimed, "Ha! Bigamy? Isn't she your sister, Mary?" His voice changed the mood of the room. Mary, unable to handle the tension, burst out, "Wait a minute. Carter told me it's not a crime to deceive Mike, so I just helped him." "Hey, hold on. Are you trying to blame everything on me?" Brown argued. Ignoring their argument, Simon added, "You got close to my brother for money, intentionally created this relationship, and are now in a bigamous situation. Sounds like marriage fraud." Brown hurriedly explained, "Wait, there's been a misunderstanding." But Simon was relentless. "And the expensive wine you're buying here, you're reselling it on personal sites at high prices, aren't you? That could be a problem." Simon continued to calmly question the two. Realizing there was no way out, Brown, who had been aggressive until now, saying, "Wait a minute. I'm sorry. That wasn't my intention at all," and knelt down, bowing deeply in apology. However, after Simon patiently explained the situation, the two seemed utterly defeated. Overhearing this, Mike cheerfully said, "Really? Was I completely fooled? Simon, thanks for saving me." Simon tried to maintain a cool facade, but he seemed a bit embarrassed. Later, Simon warned, "But there might be a financial issue concerning those two and you, brother." Mike, feeling a mix of emotions, responded with confusion, "What do you mean? Don't scare me like that." Simon explained Mike's careless management due to Brown's influence and his turning a blind eye to Brown's wine dealings, which might cause monetary issues. Given Simon's past negative impressions of Mike, he hinted, "If you don't change your ways, we might not be looking at civil suits but criminal complaints." The three knelt and sincerely apologized to Simon. Simon, having heard rumors about Mary's past shady network businesses, had been cautious. He studied law in college and had a unique part-time job at a detective agency. His experiences and connections seemed to have come in handy. I was amazed by Simon's planning and execution skills. After graduating, he achieved his dream of becoming a lawyer. His investigative abilities were recognized by many. A traumatic experience from his childhood might have made him stronger, and seeing the mature Simon in contrast to Mike warmed my heart. Years later, it turned out that Simon never pressed charges. But it wasn't just from his kindness. He mentioned that there's a statute of limitations for fraud and there's no rush since they have all the evidence. He seems to be observing if they genuinely change their behaviors. To someone unfamiliar with the law like me, Simon's strategy seemed like a threat, but it did bring about a significant change in the three of them. All three of them began new lives filled with remorse. Mary cut her long brown hair and also trimmed the nails that she had gotten done at the nail salon and started working hard at nursing home. Brown, surprising everyone, shaved his colored hair and became a monk in a temple. Considering becoming a monk is not something one would ordinarily think of. The fear of legal action must be immense. Mike, my main concern, continues to run his wine bar, gradually rebuilding trust. His wine selection is commendable. Influenced by Simon's achievements, Mike now seems committed to his work. The wine bar, located at a prime spot I found, should thrive with a little hard work. If Mike truly turns his life around, I look forward to celebrating their ups and downs, perhaps even through a book about the wine bar's journey, with a toast alongside both my sons. You really are like a parasite. Always holed up in your room playing games. This isn't a game, it's my job. I'm sick of your excuses. Hurry up and prepare dinner. I'm hungry. Unable to endure the daily criticism from my mother-in-law, I'm determined to execute a certain plan soon. My name is Sherry and I'm 27 years old. For some reason, I have been living with my husband's family for the past 6 months. Tom and I have been married for almost 2 years. I primarily earn from an internet business at home and make a steady profit. I started a blog out of curiosity in high school and immersed myself in the internet world, but my desire for a normal romance never completely vanished. However, spending most of my time at home in front of the computer, I had few opportunities to meet men and no friends to introduce me to anyone. Then I thought of registering on a matrimonial site or dating app to easily find a partner. I decided to take the plunge and register on a dating app. Registering felt like crossing the Rubicon, hoping to meet someone wonderful. As a result, I coincidentally met Tom on the dating app, thinking, if he's weird, I'll find a reason to leave quickly. I waited at the meeting place and saw a man with a refreshing smile. Before I knew it, my face was bright red. Tom, sensing my nervousness, initiated various conversations. Thanks to Tam's talkativeness, even though I'm a shy person, I got completely absorbed in our conversation. After several dates and visiting various places, I thoroughly enjoyed the time walking with Tom even though I was usually glued to my computer. A month after meeting him, I confessed, "Would you be my boyfriend?" And we started dating. I was surprised at myself for making such a bold move. A year into our relationship, Tom proposed, saying, "Let's get married." I replied, "Are you sure about me?" Of course, I had no reason to refuse. My parents really liked Tom and were overjoyed about our marriage. They were concerned I might end up single for life. I also visited Tom's family. Tom's family included his parents in their 50s, a sister 5 years older than him, and his grandfather, all living together under one roof. Tom didn't talk much about his family, but eventually I understood why. His grandfather seemed kind, but the other family members kept their distance and responded indifferently. His grandfather didn't seem to be very close to his other family members. My father-in-law was rough in speech and seemed careless. My mother-in-law was a bit too flashy for my taste. She bragged a lot, having graduated from a prestigious women's university. Both were not my type. My sister-in-law, a part-timer, also graduated from the same university but seemed dissatisfied with her post-graduation part-time work. Although both of Tam's parents were working, they didn't have a stable income and ended up relying on his sister's part-time earnings and his grandfather's pension. Considering the wedding expenses, we decided against having a ceremony and just registered our marriage instead. It was also because I wasn't comfortable having it publicly. Tam's apartment was too small for two, so we looked for a rental apartment. I needed a workspace, and splitting the rent was manageable for us. A year after marriage, Tom said seriously, "I need to talk. My grandpa at home is ill, and the family isn't helping." Tom wanted to live with them to support his grandfather, as his other family members weren't helping him. Despite my apprehensions about living with his family, I agreed to his decision. So we moved from our apartment to his family home. The move went smoothly, but the house was smaller than expected for 6 people. Excluding his grandfather's and sister's rooms, only his parents' room remained. We had no choice but to share the common spaces with them. While I work from home on my computer, my in-laws seem to view it as mere play, always casting doubtful glances at me. During such times, his grandfather said, "Sherry, having you here is a big help. I'm grateful." He continued, "I'm sorry the house is cramped, so I'm actually considering an extension." I was surprised and stared back at him. "Wouldn't it be easier for you to work if you have your own room?" "I've already got a quote." "Don't worry," he said with his usual smile. Soon, a construction company known to Tam's grandfather started work. The plan was to add 2 new rooms to the family home at the corner next to the garden. Amazingly, his grandfather also paid for our temporary hotel stay during the construction. About a month later, the extension was completed and we returned to the family home. Thanks to the new rooms, each family member now had their own space, and everyone was very happy. Sometimes, that guy does something good. My usually quiet father-in-law suddenly said that coldly. I couldn't help but feel incredulous and thought to myself, that guy. How could he refer to his own father like that? After starting life in the renovated family home, I realized several things anew. Just as Tom had said, his parents and sister really didn't help with anything. It was no wonder they couldn't care for his grandfather. Their rooms were always messy, never cleaned, and no one prepared meals. They just ate pre-made meals or boxed lunches in their own rooms. Initially, I thought they were just busy since we had just moved in. But in reality, nobody did anything. I had wondered why there was so much plastic trash, and now I knew why. Grandfather had given up on the situation and bought his own lunches. Concerned about his health, I offered, "If you'd like me to, I can cook meals for you, Grandpa." He was hesitant at first, saying, "I can't ask you to do that." But when I insisted, "I'm not working outside and I'm always home," he agreed. "If Sherry is offering, then maybe I'll accept." The next day, I started preparing breakfast and dinner for the whole family, including Tom and myself. As I announced, "Breakfast is ready," the family gathered one by one, quietly starting to eat. I didn't expect to be thanked, but since no one had ever prepared breakfast before, I thought someone might say, "Thank you." However, only Tom and Grandfather did. The other three ate silently, and I felt a bit uncomfortable. But hearing Grandfather saying, "I'm grateful to have a warm meal," really touched me. "Are you okay doing this on top of your own work?" Tom was concerned. Then, my father-in-law complained, "The food is good but bland. Are you adjusting to Dad's taste?" Hearing this, my mother-in-law coldly remarked, "Really? Such poor seasoning. How were you raised? Maybe you should study cooking a bit more." My sister-in-law, who seemingly never cooked, added sarcastically. I felt more sadness than anger and almost cried, but I held back, forcing a smile. "I'm sorry that it's not to your taste. I'll be more careful next time." Since then, my parents-in-law and sister-in-law, seeing I didn't get angry, increasingly pushed household chores onto me. I do work from home, but I'm not playing around. I have a lot to do. However, to my in-laws, it seemed like I was just playing on the computer. "Clean the room after you're done," my mother-in-law demanded, and my sister-in-law chimed in, "Clean mine too." When I refused, saying, "Please clean your own rooms," my father-in-law shouted, "Who do you think owns this house? You can't do anything. Go out and earn some money." I continued to be criticized by my mother-in-law, playing games on the computer all day. "You're really a parasite." "I'm not playing. This is my job," I initially argued. But they never listened, so eventually, I stopped responding. They were probably dissatisfied with me working on the computer at home while they worked outside. The concept of remote work seemed beyond their understanding. Moreover, my sister-in-law insulted me. "You only graduated high school, right? Just playing on the computer? Are you unemployed? Are you dumb?" Frustrated, I consulted Tom. "Did my sister say that?" "Unforgivable," exclaimed Tom as he headed to my sister-in-law's room. My sister-in-law came out lazily and looked down at him. "What? Do you need something? You don't understand anything. Sherry is actually working at home. She's not unemployed." As Tom argued, my sister-in-law sarcastically said, "What can you do on a computer? I get you're defending your wife, but it's laughable." It seemed impossible to get through to her. I seriously began considering whether I should leave the house. But that would mean ignoring Tam's concern for his grandfather. I was deeply troubled. Then, suddenly, his grandfather fell ill. Although he had been stable, it seemed his heart condition had worsened. Tom didn't want to worry me and kept silent, but this was his real concern. Despite life-saving efforts at the hospital, his grandfather passed away soon after. Losing our emotional support in those difficult times, we were at a loss about what to do as a couple. However, we first had to start preparing for the funeral. While holding back our grief, Tom and I transferred his grandfather from the hospital and proceeded with the funeral preparations. My father-in-law, who had always disliked his serious father, seemed inwardly pleased by his death. He pretended to be sad in front of the mourners, but quickly became lazy when alone. My mother-in-law did the same, showing tears in front of guests but complaining and showing annoyance privately. My sister-in-law didn't even come out of her room. What was happening with this family? I, grief-stricken by his grandfather's death, felt anger toward them. My father-in-law made a serious face and attended to the mourners during the funeral. My mother-in-law and sister also looked sad, but it seemed like they were mocking us. It seemed so fake to me. Tom, who was dearly loved by his grandfather, proceeded with the funeral while holding back tears. He was commendably different from his other family members. After the funeral, my in-laws' attitude changed drastically. My father-in-law coldly said to his father's photo, Good thing you expanded the house before going to heaven. You were a burden, but you were useful in the end. My mother-in-law added, right, having more space is a relief. It feels refreshing. And it would be better if the annoying ones leave. My sister-in-law glanced at me and commented. Approaching them, I said, I understand that our presence is a bother. If that's what you wish, I'll leave. Now that grandfather was gone, there was no reason for us to stay. Hearing this, my father-in-law shouted, finally decided to leave? Get out, parasite. My sister-in-law said, you're not family or anything. I've always disliked Tom for being too serious. I dislike you even more, so leave quickly. My mother-in-law continued, you're bad at cooking and cleaning, neurotic and weird. Just leave quickly. I tried to remain calm and told them, okay, I'll leave, but wait for a week. I need to prepare for the move. Tom and I had already planned to leave the house. We had decided living with my in-laws was impossible and had already chosen a place to move to. We intended to take grandfather with us, but he passed away before that. There was no turning back. We had to move forward. A week passed, and the moving day came. I'm leaving then, I said politely on purpose. Get out. You were always in the way. My father-in-law rudely retorted. You've been living in my house and can't even say thank you, he continued. I'm leaving, but I've been paying the mortgage for this house, I counted, and he laughed it off disdainfully. Unemployed people playing on the computer can't possibly pay the mortgage. Stop lying, he retorted mockingly. That's when Tom intervened. Dad, you thought Grandpa was paying the mortgage, but it was actually too much for him. So, Sherry decided to take over it. The mortgage was in Grandpa's name, but Sherry had been paying for it. My father-in-law looked surprised and incredulous. No way. How much is she earning anyway? My father-in-law asked. I calmly replied, well, I earned about $20,000 last month. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked skeptical at my casual response, but it didn't matter to me. It was the truth. Now that Grandpa has passed away, you, as the heir, will own this house, I said with a smile. My father-in-law raised his voice, of course. What are you talking about? Then I continued, so, please take care of the inheritance tax. Oh, and don't forget about the remaining mortgage. My father-in-law turned pale. What? You said you were paying the mortgage. Yes, I was paying for it, but it was to help Grandpa. Now that he's gone, I'm not obligated to pay. My in-laws looked astonished at this revelation. My father-in-law hesitantly asked, so, how much is left on the mortgage? I deliberately didn't give a clear answer. Probably about $100,000. My father-in-law collapsed in shock. Also, all the furniture and appliances purchased during the renovation were bought by me. A moving company will come to collect them later. They were speechless, but it was no longer our concern. With that thought, we decided to leave the family home. Take care and goodbye, I said with a smile as Tom and I walked away. I had no regrets. Tom and I quickly moved to our new apartment. After unloading our things, Tom murmured, we just couldn't get along with that family. Huh? I looked at Tam's face. Tom slowly began to open up. Grandpa was the only one who was always kind to me, like a real family. I was surprised at his words. Dad always told me to work. It became unbearable. But this is for the best. Tom said that with a relieved smile. By now, the family home would be bustling with the moving truck. Most things would be gone, except for the new furniture and appliances we bought. Maybe we were a bit harsh, but after being insulted for so long, it seemed hardly enough. Sometime after moving, the phone rang. It was probably from the family home. I deliberately ignored it a few times before answering. Hello, I responded. From the other end, my father-in-law's angry voice came through. Why is the inheritance tax so high? I never heard anything about it. I can't pay this, and the mortgage payments are so high, plus the utility bills. What should I do? I had anticipated my father-in-law wouldn't be able to pay. I knew the land prices in the area around the family home were rising. An increase in inheritance tax was easy to predict. Moreover, because my in-laws were all either regular or part-time workers, they were barely managing on grandfather's pension. They couldn't afford the mortgage payments. The extension was possible because I was paying the mortgage. If you can't make the payments, you'll have to sell the house and use that money to pay, I suggested calmly. Help us. We're family. I was wrong before. Please help. My father-in-law pleaded, but I no longer considered them my family. Family? My only family is Tom. I also heard that Tom was adopted. I've said we're no longer involved with you. Please don't involve yourselves with us either, I stated firmly and hung up the phone. I heard shouting from the other end, but I didn't need to listen anymore. Half a year later, I happened to pass by the family home and saw it in disrepair with a for sale sign and the realtor's contact information. It seemed the family home had to be sold due to financial difficulties. It was truly regrettable that the extension made for us by grandfather was all for naught. I wanted to end any involvement with people who treated their family poorly. With that thought, we left the family home. According to neighbors, my father-in-law, facing financial difficulties, had borrowed heavily from multiple consumer lenders. Since even that was not enough, he even resorted to illegal lenders and was ultimately cornered by debt collectors. To manage that situation, they eventually sold the house to pay off the debts. However, the debts weren't fully settled, and now they live in a small apartment, with my father-in-law and his family having to work multiple jobs and long hours. We've settled into our new home, and I've finished organizing everything. I now have my own workspace and a comfortable environment to work in. My newly started online shop is doing surprisingly well, keeping me busy. Tom's job is going well too, and he seems likely to get a promotion. I sometimes think back on our days at the family home, but I never want to experience anything like that again. Now, Tom and I are living happily together. Oh, right. Actually, our family is going to grow. After moving, I felt unwell and visited the doctor, where I discovered I was pregnant. The baby is growing healthily inside me. Will it be a boy or a girl? I ponder this while choosing baby items. Tom, too, seems excited about our new life. For him, raised as an adopted child, this baby will be his first blood-related family. I'm sure grandfather in heaven is smiling down on us. I'm really looking forward to our future, walking together as three. Tom, myself, and the baby. I'm praying for the baby to be born safely. Lately, I've also been trying knitting. I'm knitting socks for the baby, but I'm not very good at it yet, so I keep knitting and unraveling. I'll be good at this by the time you're born. I tell the baby in my belly. My name is Lindsay. I'm a 29-year-old company employee, and this year means I'm getting older still. I met Jake, a year older than me, through friends, and we decided to marry 6 months after we started dating. Jake, who made a name for himself in tennis during his student days, is an active person who continues to play tennis even now. As I was in the tennis club during my student days, we immediately found common ground together. Once we started dating, we would often play tennis together on the weekends. One day, after our date, Jake proposed to me and we decided to get married. It's been almost 3 years since we got married. We don't have children, but we bought an apartment after getting married and have been living together ever since. Both of us work, and while we aren't struggling financially, we can't say that we're wealthy either. We're living a happy life. However, something happened between us that shattered my peaceful days. One day, Jake suddenly asked me to come to his parents' house. Surprised, I hurried there to find Jake, his parents, and an unknown woman waiting for me. As I struggled to understand the situation, Jake suddenly knelt down and said, "Lindsay, I'm truly sorry. The truth is, I've been involved with this woman here, Olivia. Last week, we found out that Olivia is pregnant. I feel responsible for her and the baby. So I think it's better that we separate. I'm sorry, but I want a divorce." Jake shocked me with this revelation. Exposed to his infidelity, the pregnancy, and faced with his demands for divorce, I was stunned. That was when my mother-in-law spoke to me. "Lindsay, please forgive Jake. Yes, he cheated. But the problem lies with you two. You and Jake weren't really a good match from the beginning. So, I'm sorry, but please forget about him." And my father-in-law added, "Olivia's father is an executive at a major company. A man in a totally different position from someone like your poor father. I think you know who's more suitable for our son." I couldn't believe it. Jake's father belittled not only me, but also my father too. Normally, parents would put the blame on their son for cheating, but Jake's parents didn't seem to think that way. Instead, they seemed to think it was natural for us to divorce, and that their son had done nothing wrong. I took the divorce papers and said, "I understand what you all want to say. Being with people who have such warped thoughts might affect me too. I'm shocked at how you make it seem like I'm the villain despite Jake's infidelity. Don't worry, I'll file these divorce papers myself. I'll leave the rest to a lawyer." And with that, I quickly left the scene. As I left, my father-in-law mockingly said, "A poor person hiring a lawyer? What a waste of time and money, when she doesn't even have any. She shouldn't bite off more than she can chew." Ha ha ha. Ignoring him, I left his parents' house and immediately went to City Hall to file the divorce papers. At least I was able to end my marriage with Jake. The next day, surprisingly, Jake and Olivia came to my apartment. Seeing me, Jake said, "Oh, you're still here? You haven't even packed your things. You're taking your time, aren't you?" Hearing this, Olivia also looked at me curiously. I was furious at Jake's words. "What are you talking about? You're the one who should be taking it slow. This is my house, so you should be the one to leave. The movers are coming soon to take all your belongings to your parents' house. If there's anything you don't want them to touch, you should take it now," I retorted. Hearing this, Jake suddenly panicked. "What? This is my house. The ownership should be in my name," he exclaimed. I was dumbfounded. After all, this apartment was bought in my name. I had already told Jake about this, and about my family's background before we got married. But it seems that Jake is the type to conveniently forget things that don't suit him. Perhaps this carefree nature is why he was easily swayed by Olivia. I showed the deed to the apartment and my name was clearly written on it. Jake's face quickly changed upon seeing it. Meanwhile, Olivia's face began to cloud over with anger. "Jake, what is this all about? This is completely different from what you told me before. Were you deceiving me?" Olivia began to confront him. This is strange. What's happening?" Jake responded in confusion. "That's not an answer. Explain yourself." Olivia pressed on. "First, this is my house, so please take your argument outside. And just so you know, Jake has various debts. So if you're planning to marry him, be prepared for that burden." I calmly stated the facts to Olivia. Hearing this, Olivia seemed about to say something, but I didn't care and kicked both of them out of the room, slamming the door behind them. After a while, I could hear them arguing outside the door, but it eventually quieted down. About an hour later, the movers finally arrived and took all of Jake's belongings to his parents' house. The room was now clean, and I was relaxing in the newly organized space. But it was short-lived. Suddenly, the intercom rang repeatedly. I cautiously opened the door with the chain lock still on, and my mother-in-law was standing there. "Hello, is there something you need?" "Lindsay, why did you keep such an important thing a secret? What are you talking about? I can't believe it. But Jake just told me that this apartment is in your name and that your parents are the owners of that famous restaurant chain." It seemed Jake finally remembered my family's circumstances. "What about it? If I had known, I would never have let this divorce happen. A daughter from such a wealthy family. We would love to have you back in our family. Lindsay, please, reconsider and start over with Jake." I was shocked and at a loss for words at her outrageous request. I couldn't possibly agree to what she was asking. "You really have a terrible way of thinking about things. Am I not a human being? Are you only interested in money? I'm sorry, but I don't want anything more to do with you. There's nothing more to talk about, so please leave," I said and attempted to close the door. But my mother-in-law, infuriated by my attitude, raised her voice in anger. Don't be so arrogant. I'm giving you my permission to reconcile your differences. Fix things with him right now. I won't leave this spot until you agree to get back together. Open this door immediately. She said this, pounding on the door repeatedly. I decided that I couldn't handle this alone and called the police. They came and took my mother-in-law away. Even as the officers were taking her, she was shouting something loudly, but I no longer cared to listen to her words. There was a reason why my in-laws were unaware of my family's business background. My father, coming from a poor background since childhood, continued to live modestly, even after becoming a company president. He never considered buying branded clothes. He always took great care of his belongings and used them for a long time. Hence, at our wedding, he wore a suit he had bought decades ago. Seeing this, my in-laws assumed that my father was not financially well off and misunderstood his restaurant chain as a small, privately owned business. As a result, they never delved deeper into my father's business. Time went by without them understanding the true circumstances of my family. Days after managing to send my mother-in-law home, Jake tried to persuade me to reconcile our differences. His persistence was incredibly exhausting. It was surprising how insistent he was, despite the fact that he was the one who proposed the divorce. He seems to have a talent for quickly forgetting inconvenient truths. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock on, and Jake, upon seeing me, began to speak with teary eyes. Lindsay, please, let's give it another try. Everything is my fault. I'm truly sorry. I still love you. Let's be together again. He then explained a sudden turn of events. Olivia had apparently approached Jake aiming to get his house, pretending to be pregnant to sway him. However, once she learned about Jake's considerable debts, she gave up and fled. And now, Jake was coming to me to seek reconciliation. Huh? What are you saying? I don't know anything about that. How can you say that? After you cheated and brought up divorce, now that she's left you, you want to get back together? There's no limit to your audacity. I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever come here again. I refused Jake right there and then. Surprisingly, he quietly left. However, this was not to be their last attempt. Days later, Jake's entire family unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. They were shouting, "Bring out Lindsay. Get that woman out here. We know she's here," causing chaos in the office and leading to the security guards being called. I stood there, dumbfounded by the situation. But they wouldn't have things their way any longer. I worked at the headquarters of my father's company, and that day, my father was also in the office. All of my colleagues also supported me. Hey, what are you doing? This is my company. Don't just barge in and make a scene. I know everything you did to demean my daughter. Don't ever come near her again, and never set foot in this company again. My usually calm father shouted furiously at my ex-in-laws. Everyone, including the employees and Jake's family, must have been surprised at the anger of my father, who usually only shows his gentle and calm side. Sorry. We're really sorry. Jake's family desperately apologized. My father's stern words had immediately quieted them down. As they were being escorted out by security, my father shouted in a strong voice, "Don't you ever come here again, and never do something like this again. I won't allow it. You understand?" Hearing this, I couldn't stop myself from crying. I felt a deep sense of gratitude that my father had gotten so angry for my sake. Later, through the company's legal advisor, I decided to seek damages from Jake's family. I sought damages for the divorce due to Jake's infidelity, for his persistent attempts at reconciliation after the divorce, and for the disturbance at my workplace. The total amount was substantial, and I eventually received payment from them. I also made them sign a written agreement promising never to come before me again. Jake's family's state of affairs rapidly declined thereafter. Chased by the money owed to me and Jake's existing debts, they ended up selling their home and moving far away. In town, the story spread that Jake had committed adultery, divorced his wife, and after being abandoned by his mistress, attempted to reconcile. Facing such embarrassment, they could no longer stay in this town. While I felt a bit of sympathy for them, I also knew that everything was a consequence of their actions, so it was clearly deserved. Jake's family never appeared before me again. Finally, I was able to resume my peaceful days. However, my father had harsh words for me as well regarding what had happened. He blamed me for not recognizing before the marriage that Jake was a person who would commit adultery and accrue debts. Certainly, while Jake was at fault, my lack of insight was also partly to blame. Unable to argue with my father, I felt disappointed and disillusioned with marriage. I felt that I needed to give my heart a break. However, about a year later, I decided to marry my colleague, Matt. Matt was sincere and earnest in his work, trusted by everyone. I was initially attracted by his personality, but as we started dating, I was also drawn to his lifestyle. His life was surprisingly simple. He never indulged in branded items, used everyday things for a long time, but generously spent money and spoiled me on dates. His behavior was very similar to my father's. My father, who usually saves money, would splurge on family trips, bringing us joy. I deeply loved and respected my father. Realizing Matt's actions were similar to my father's, I felt that I could be happy with him in the future. Therefore, I decided to marry Matt. I was worried about being scolded by my father for remarrying within a year of my divorce, but his reaction was surprisingly positive, probably because he had heard of Matt's reputation at work and knew of his character. There was nothing bad said about Matt, and from my father's perspective as the company president, Matt seemed to be performing exceptionally well. I feel confident that Matt will take good care of you, Lindsay, my father told me happily. Matt and I were happily married. Not long after our marriage, we discovered that I was with a child. The happiest person to hear this news was undoubtedly my father. I was so glad to see my father happy. Reflecting on my time with Jake, where we didn't have children even after 3 years of marriage, it seemed like a stroke of luck. Matt and I plan to take over the company in the future. We are currently learning the basics of management from my father. Although there are many challenges, we accept that they are our responsibility as successors, and we are working hard together. We believe that we will need even more effort for the sake of our upcoming child, despite all that's happened. I am now very happy. Together with my family, we intend to firmly support this company in the future. How long will you depend on your husband's income? If you have something to say to us, become independent without relying on Daniel first, and then we'll talk. It's unbelievable that you live without paying rent. You're such a waste. They began to shout and rant. I could no longer bear it. I would rather live a lonely life than stay in that house. I would never try to make those uncomprehending people understand me. I stood up quietly and then I said to them, I'm leaving. Where do you think you're going? Without a guarantor, you won't be able to find a place to live, won't you? My father-in-law spoke with a tone of concern, but I could feel the unpleasant disdain in his words. Regardless, I had no intention of asking for help from my in-laws. Don't worry. I'll manage somehow. With those words, I left the house. My name is Stacy Manning. I am 30 years old. I was blessed with warm parents and led a happy life. Being an only child, the way my mother doted on me seemed laughable in retrospect. But 10 years ago, my parents passed away in an unexpected accident. At that time, as a university student, I fell into a deep depression as if I had lost my will to live. My savior at that time was my current husband, Daniel. I met Daniel, who's 10 years older than me, at the company I worked for after graduating from university. Touched by his warmth, I gradually began to regain my smile. Eventually, I developed a fondness for Daniel and we began dating. Since starting my relationship with Daniel, both my work and personal life became fulfilling, and I began to feel happiness. After 3 years of dating, he proposed to me. I had visited Daniel's parents' home many times during our relationship and had built a good relationship with them. His mother was always warm and would say, "Daniel has chosen you, and we're happy to have you." Believing her words, I accepted his proposal. At that time, I had no doubts and felt pure joy. However, when I told his parents that we were getting married, their attitude changed dramatically. "You're serious about getting married? We were okay building a relationship with you because we thought you'd both eventually break up," she raged. Both Daniel and I were surprised by her sudden change. However, he then said to me, "Since I am their only son, maybe they are just shocked that I'm finally getting married. A son is a special being to a mother," I often heard. So, we didn't take it seriously. But she was unexpectedly disturbed by our marriage so much that, despite the smooth progress of our marriage preparations, she repeatedly told Daniel, "You should avoid young women. She's surely after your money. Women closer to your age or with more experience would be more suitable." Since she said that to Daniel many times, I figured out that she was indeed opposed to the marriage and did not think well of me. However, I didn't know why she disliked me so much, and that fact pained my heart. Daniel always protected and supported me. I tried to improve my relationship with her and to have as many face-to-face opportunities as possible. Then, one day, an unexpected event occurred when we visited his parents' home to decide on the wedding guests. His mother calmly stated, "No need for guests. You'll end up getting divorced soon anyway." Daniel stood up and appealed to her, "Mom, please stop. You cared about Stacy so much until we decided to get married. Why would you say such a thing? Dad, say something," and sought support from his usually silent father. His father looked at us, cleared his throat, and spoke, "With all due respect, I heard that Stacy was living by herself until she met you. We've been kind out of sympathy, but welcoming her into the family is a different matter. Having been living alone means there's no one to vouch for her character. I'm sorry, but love and marriage are different things." When I heard that, I felt as if I had been hit in the head with a blunt object. The sorrow of losing my parents was enough, but I never imagined that it would cause me to be treated this way. Daniel was also visibly devastated by those words and tearfully said, "No one to vouch for Stacy's character? I have been by her side all this time. She is truly warm and kind-hearted. You both said so, didn't you?" He appealed to his parents and then fell silent. My heart was also full of pain. Unable to endure the situation any longer, I eventually chose to part ways with Daniel. One day, around half a year after our separation, I unexpectedly ran into Daniel's mother at work. Daniel and I had worked at the same company, but we were in different departments, so our paths rarely crossed. Now that our relationship was over, I shouldn't have had any chance of meeting her, yet she came to my department asking, "Is Stacy here?" "Yes, I'm here. It's been a while. We need to talk." She approached me with a social smile, and my face stiffened with tension. "There's a bit of time left until the end of the day. I'll wait for you at the cafe outside." With those words, she left the room. In our department, many people come and go all the time, and no one pays much attention to any visitor. But the conversation she wanted to have might cause some troubles if someone were to overhear it. Unable to treat her rudely, I nodded in agreement. After finishing my work, I headed to the cafe where she was already drinking coffee alone. "You must be tired," she said with a forced smile as she saw me. "What's happening? Don't be so stiff. My husband and I regret the harsh things we said to you." "Really? If we were the cause for your separation with Daniel, forget about us. You two are free to decide on your marriage and everything else." I could not hide my surprise at her words. I had no idea what made her change her mind, but her intentions didn't matter to me. Since I still had feelings for Daniel, I was happy to hear those words. That night, I received a call from Daniel. It seemed he hadn't forgotten about me either, and after discussing about our future together, we ended up reconciling. The marriage plans that had been extinguished before were now starting anew. This time, however, his parents accepted me quietly. After starting a new life together with Daniel, I felt the warmth of my parents-in-law and was fulfilled. However, sometime after the marriage, I overheard my mother-in-law talking on the phone. Yes, he married that orphan. For now, everything is going smoothly. I stopped in my tracks. She was using the word orphan. It was the same term she used when she drove me out of the house. I felt bitterness in her words as she used it in her phone conversation then. Unaware that I was listening, my mother-in-law continued her conversation. I thought an older woman would be better, but as you said, a young wife requires less care. An older woman would also increase the risks of miscarriage. So it's also reassuring in that sense. We took her in despite having been living alone, so she must take good care of us. It seemed she was talking to a friend, but it didn't matter who the other party was. I felt a deep betrayal and despair at her words. My mother-in-law had not truly accepted me. It seemed she had deemed me a usable entity based on a friend's suggestion. Even from that short conversation, I could discern the truth and felt unimaginable sadness. But Daniel believed that his parents had repented their previous actions and had accepted me. I wanted to avoid hurting him, so I decided to keep this fact to myself. Since then, I've maintained a reasonable distance with my in-laws. You can rely more on Mom for housework. Dad will help right away even if it's just to change a light bulb, Daniel would say kindly, but I didn't want to be indebted to my in-laws. Don't worry, I can handle such things myself. I would decline his suggestions politely every time. A year passed, and as we entered our second year of marriage, we were still working together and living with his parents. In the midst of our changing daily life, an incident occurred while Daniel was away on a business trip. For the first time, it was just his parents and I living together, and I had no parental home or place to return to. With no escape, I reluctantly welcomed the night. The dining table, usually surrounded by 4, was now set for 3, and the atmosphere was clearly different from usual. And it was a certain remark from my mother-in-law that accentuated this unease. "Stacy, I find it difficult to ask when Daniel is around, but when are you all going to have children?" "Yes, about that. It's a blessing we haven't been able to receive yet." I had anticipated that question someday, but still, I was taken aback by such a direct inquiry. "You contribute nothing to the household finances and you don't have any children. I can't see the point of having welcomed you into this house." Seeing my timid demeanor, my mother-in-law expressed her anger. I couldn't say a word back to her. In the past, childless women were called useless and could be driven out of the house. My father-in-law, despite his gentle tone, showered me with harsh words. I just kept silent and continued my meal. However, perhaps my lack of apology or rebuttal displeased her. In her anger, she stood up and threw the apron I had worn out of the window. I was just dumbfounded by her sudden action. But her bizarre behavior did not stop there. She went around the house, grabbing my belongings at random, and threw them out of the window right before my eyes. "Why do you buy such expensive aprons and kitchenware when your cooking skills are mediocre at best? Really? What do you think of Daniel's earnings?" Her action of throwing out my belongings was clearly irrational. Yet, she seemed completely unaware of her abnormal behavior. After discarding everything, she said with satisfaction, "We really should have never welcomed an orphan like you into our home. Your silence means your parents must have left this world without giving you proper upbringing." I had remained silent for a long time, but I could not endure those words and expressed my anger. I slammed my fork down on the table and glared sharply at her. Seeing her flinch for a moment, my father-in-law then scolded me loudly as if to back her up. "What are you doing, Stacy? Your attitude is unacceptable. Be grateful you have food to eat. That's only possible because Daniel is here." He continued, "That's right. How long will you depend on your husband's income? If you have something to say to us, become independent without relying on Daniel first, and then we'll talk. It's unbelievable that you live without paying rent. You're such a waste." In response to my defiance, both of them began to shout in anger. I could no longer bear it. I would rather live a lonely life than stay in that house. I would never try to make these uncomprehending people understand me. I quietly stood up, Then I said to them, I'm leaving. That night, I started preparing to move out. I went out to the garden, picked up my belongings one by one, dusted off the mud on their surface, and packed them in my bag. My in-laws just watched me pick up my things. Their faces seemed to mock me, but they said nothing. The next day, I left the house with my belongings. I'm leaving. I don't know where you're going, but until the divorce is official, don't cause any trouble, she said. I don't know if that was an appropriate farewell to a daughter-in-law leaving the house or not. However, instead of responding, I simply stood there silently. Where are you going? Without a guarantor, you won't be able to find a place to live, won't you? He spoke with a tone of concern, but I could feel the unpleasant disdain in his words. Regardless, I had no intention of asking them for help. Don't worry, I'll manage somehow. With those words, I left the house. Then the night came. Stacy, where are you? When Daniel returned from his trip, it seemed he was informed by his parents that I had left the house. He contacted me in a hurry. Why did you leave the house? If you have any problems with me, why don't we talk about it? Let's discuss this properly. What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with you. The truth is, I was forced out of the house by your parents. What? Daniel was silent after hearing my story, obviously surprised. No doubt, his parents must have told him that I left on my own accord. We decided to meet and talk, even if I was determined to get a divorce. We should at least discuss it face to face. When we met up at the arranged place, I opened up to Daniel about the way his parents had been treating me. It must have been hard for him to accept the fact that his seemingly warm parents actually did not accept me at all. Still, he believed me. I'm sorry I didn't notice the tough time you were going through, he said with tears in his eyes. My heart ached to see him like this. He was a victim too. His happiness was threatened by his own parents. Not wanting to burden Daniel any further, I took out the divorce papers. But upon seeing them, Daniel immediately tore them up. I'm going to leave that house too. I won't leave you alone. What? From now on, we'll walk our own path, free from my parents. We won't have to be apart anymore. I was moved by Daniel's resolve and could only nod in agreement. Hand in hand, we returned to his parents' house where they had been waiting for us to return. So, have you already filed for divorce? My mother-in-law asked Daniel sarcastically upon seeing me. Did you come back to pick up your stuff? Well, you're still young. You'll find someone else. My father-in-law's words might have been intended as encouragement, but their insensitivity was exasperating. Daniel spoke up boldly. We're not getting divorced. I'm starting a new life with Stacy. So, we're leaving this place. His parents were shocked and outraged at his declaration. Leave? Why would you leave for someone like her? Mom, how did you even think of driving Stacy out of the house? I can't understand you at all. Upon hearing his retort, she gasped and was at a loss for words. I think it's inhumane to trample on everything Stacy has done for this family. I can't call such people parents. Daniel criticized them with even more vigor. Overwhelmed by his strong tone, my in-laws laughed mockingly as if to tease him upon hearing his words. Ha ha ha. Everything she has done, you say? I have no personal ill will towards Stacy, but to say that she's been supporting us is an exaggeration. Honestly, whether she's here or not makes no difference. That's right. If anything, we've been taking care of her all this time. Indeed, Stacy hasn't been putting her salary into the household, hasn't she? She's just been eating away at your earnings. As they continued to ridicule me, Daniel grew increasingly angry with every word. What are you talking about? Who's been spending Stacy's savings? What? Daniel, I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't be stopped. The living expenses here have all been covered by Stacy. I've been saving my income for the future, to be used when we would need to take care of you both. Stacy said this arrangement would make you both happy. Daniel repeated the words I had said at the beginning of our marriage. She promised to take on all the living expenses, and it's thanks to her that we have what we do now. How can you say such things? He emphasized. At this, my parents-in-law looked at each other. As if she couldn't believe it, his mother retorted, "Oh, that can't be true. I heard that Stacy has been saving all her salary." Furthermore, his father said, "You're saying we can live on her salary alone? That's ridiculous. You've been poisoned by Stacy's words and become a pathetic son." They were screaming in frustration. I couldn't help but feel angry at those words. What Daniel's saying is true. I kept silent out of consideration for the two of you, but I cannot stand by while he is made out to be the villain. Stacy, the truth is, the living expenses were being managed from my parents' inheritance. My father owned a lot of real estate, so even now, we still have rental income coming in. I've been using those funds for our living expenses. It seemed that my in-laws were at a loss for words at this revelation. Their faces turned pale. Their mouths agape. They seemed to be struggling with how to cover up their own blunder. So that's how it was. We didn't understand anything. My mother-in-law tried to laugh it off with a desperate smile toward me. However, that contrived smile was distasteful to me. I thought her angry expression earlier was better than her hideous smile. However, there will be no need for that from now on. Daniel and I will leave here, so you two should just take care of yourselves. With that, wait a minute. As we tried to leave after saying what we wanted to, my father-in-law dropped to his knees to stop us. However, Daniel coldly rejected his father and said, "I had hoped that you both would change. This is truly sad." Afterward, I led Daniel to our home. The house I moved into is also one of the properties I inherited from my father. The luxurious house, worth $3 million, had been rented out to a famous person overseas until recently. The celebrity had just finished her activities in the US and returned home, and the home cleaning was completed, making it ready for us to move in right away. The day I was driven out by my in-laws, I decided to live in this house and obtain the keys from the real estate agent. I had heard about it, but it really is a wonderful house. This was Daniel's first time visiting, and he was very pleased. Then, we started a happy life together. However, my in-laws somehow found our address and one day suddenly visited us together. Stacy, when I got home, there was my mother-in-law calling my name. I recognized her immediately, but I had no time to hide. The bad weather and rain impaired visibility, and although she called my name, it took me a while to locate her. Meanwhile, they hurriedly approached me. "Mother, I'm so glad. I was searching around here, thinking it must be near." It seemed they had made it this far relying on the address, but they couldn't find the actual house. But more than their appearance, I was concerned about the luggage they carried. My mother-in-law had a large tote bag, and my father-in-law carried a suitcase. Noticing my gaze fixed on their luggages, my mother-in-law looked down at her tote bag. "Oh, this. Actually, we just got back from a trip and bought some souvenirs." Could that really be the case? As I continued to stare silently at them, both of them started speaking apologetically. "We truly regret our actions. That's why we want to apologize properly again." It's true. My father-in-law also apologized. Whether their attitudes were sincere or not, I couldn't be harsh to people who were apologizing in the rain, carrying heavy luggages. The place had a lot of traffic, and I preferred to talk to them somewhere more private. "Let's talk inside." Reluctantly, I led them into my home. "This is your house. This big house." My mother-in-law was astonished by the size of the house. My father-in-law, too, was looking around with keen eyes. As I prepared coffee and urged them to sit, my mother-in-law, in high spirits, began opening the doors of the rooms one after another, saying, "Wait a minute. What are these rooms? With so many rooms, we could live here too." The modest demeanor they had shown outside had vanished, and there they were, the same presumptuous in-laws as before. I was confused, but then Daniel came home. As soon as he noticed his parents, he raised his voice. "Why are you two here?" and approached them. "Daniel, don't be so angry. We just came to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Please leave." "But you're our son, aren't you? We can live together, can't we?" When my mother-in-law began to say such things, I was disappointed. The apology was nothing but a lie. From the beginning, my in-laws came seeking to live with us. I was deceived by their act and let them into the house too easily. Disappointed in my own carelessness, I looked at Daniel. The three were discussing in the hallway, away from the rooms in the house. Feeling that I was burdening Daniel once again, I suddenly grabbed the large tote bag my mother-in-law brought, slipped through them, headed to the front door, and threw it out into the rain. "What are you doing?" Their argument stopped abruptly at my sudden action. Then, I also threw out the suitcase my father-in-law carried. "How dare you throw out people's luggages?" Unbelievable. My father-in-law's face turned red with anger, and they hurried out into the rain to retrieve their luggage. "I have had my belongings thrown away by you before." My mother-in-law looked surprised at my words, as if remembering her actions. Furthermore, despite being Daniel's wife, I was also driven out of the house. "I would like to ask what kind of nerve you have to want to live with us." "That's why. We came to apologize for that." "No need for apologies. I can no longer think of you two as family. Please do not interfere with us from now on." She then responded angrily. "Daniel is my son. I won't let someone like you take him away." Her insistence was strong, but such a claim would not reach Daniel. "Well, that's that then." Daniel said that with a smile and then closed and locked the front door. His parents, wet under the rain, seemed to have no choice but to return to their own house that day. However, they did not give up and visited us every day. Since Daniel and I were at work during the day, they used this to their advantage and checked around the house for any open windows. I knew this because they had entered through a bathroom window that I had forgotten to close. A passerby had seen them and thankfully called the police. We also had a contract with a security company, so Daniel was immediately notified as the contract holder. The security company contacted me. "It seems there's an intruder at home." Daniel immediately informed me, and we both rushed home. When we arrived, there were already police cars and security company vehicles parked, and many onlookers. We are not thieves. In the midst of it all, there was my mother-in-law being let out by the police. Daniel and I were just dismayed at the sight of her resisting and raising her voice. Daniel, tell the police we are not suspicious people." My mother-in-law called out to Daniel upon seeing us. The police approached us and asked, "Are you the owners of the house? Do you know this person?" Daniel then deliberately answered in a loud voice, "Yes, I am the owner of the house. I would like you to thoroughly investigate what intentions this person had for entering." After he replied calmly, my mother-in-law showed a look of despair. Daniel didn't confirm whether he knew her or not to the police officer. Following his response, the police officer led my mother-in-law toward the patrol car. My father-in-law followed. He avoided eye contact with us, and Daniel didn't try to look at him either. Eventually, both of them were put into separate patrol cars and were taken away by the police. They claimed they didn't steal anything and just wanted to rest in the house. Daniel was shaking with anger, but I decided to use this opportunity to ensure that we would never be involved with them again, and agreed to withdraw the complaint. Since then, my in-laws have kept their promise and haven't come to our house. One peaceful day, sometime after we could live peacefully, I saw my father-in-law being scolded by an older lady while working part-time at the supermarket. It seems they couldn't make ends meet without working. I smiled faintly and discreetly left the scene. When I got home and told Daniel about it, he burst into laughter. If Dad hadn't always listened to Mom, he might have had a better life. It's sad to see he continues to sacrifice himself for her. Indeed, there is some truth to Daniel's words. My father-in-law has never been a man of strong will and always did whatever my mother-in-law asked. This likely led to the current problem. Also, the break-in has become neighborhood gossip, and they're both being shunned now. Mom's pleasant facade was her only asset, and now even that's gone, I do feel a bit sorry for her. Daniel informed me of her current situation, apparently having learned it through a friend. He also told that friend about all the things my in-laws had done to me. The rumors about the mistreatments you received will probably spread fast. It's the end for those two. But they're your family. Are you really okay with this? I asked Daniel, feeling a bit concerned. Then, with a surprised look turning into a gentle smile, Daniel said, "You are my only family, Stacy." At those words, tears welled up in my eyes. But Daniel's family isn't just me. I placed my hand on my stomach and told him, "It's not just me. There's another one." "What?" "I went to the hospital today, and I found out I'm 3 months pregnant." At that, Daniel's eyes widened, and he smiled a blissful smile I had never seen before. Once an orphan, I now have the most precious family of my own. I am determined to cherish this miracle and create a happy family life, so my parents in heaven can be at peace forever. Now that my son has passed away, you'll return to your parents' place, right? It'd be sad if this house was left empty, so we'll live here. You don't need to worry at all. This happened after my beloved husband suddenly passed away. It was his parents who appeared before me, sunk in sorrow, just after the funeral had ended. Admittedly, the memories I had with my husband in this residence weren't many, but why was I the one who had to leave this place? Without a moment to wipe away my tears, I was coldly told so by my mother-in-law. "I am Hannah. I work at a real estate company. I met my husband, Tyler, thanks to the real estate company I work for. He was the brother of a colleague of mine. The brothers were very close to each other, and thus he often showed his face around because their workplaces were close. Working together as clerks, I also became friendly with the colleague who would later become my brother-in-law. It was through this connection that he introduced me to his own brother. They gradually invited me to have lunch together more often, and our time spent together increased. Tyler was a bright and nice person to talk to, but I never saw him as a man. I thought he felt the same until one day when something changed our relationship. At the restaurant where we had arranged to meet, a sudden matter came up, and only my colleague couldn't make it. However, it seemed like a waste to cancel the reservation. And so we ended up spending time together, just the two of us. I found out later that it was all planned in advance. At the request of Tyler, my brother-in-law had intentionally set it up so that the two of us would be alone. With delicious food, our conversation flowed, and we soon found ourselves sharing things about our past and our thoughts, rapidly deepening our intimacy. The more I got to know him, the more I was drawn to his warm smile. That day became a turning point, and our relationship evolved. It didn't take us long to reach marriage. If not for my brother-in-law, this wonderful development might not have happened. I was immensely grateful to him, not only for that but for all that was about to happen in the future. The day to meet my in-laws for the first time arrived. I was full of anxiety, but my in-laws warmly welcomed me. The heartwarming exchanges continued, and my tension gradually eased. "I'm really happy you came. I was looking forward to meeting you, Hannah. I have prepared a lot of things for you, hoping that today will be a wonderful day," said my mother-in-law, who was getting things ready. My husband, the eldest son, resembled them a lot, and my in-laws were also very independent and easy to get along with. The time spent at their home was comfortable, and I was filled with gratitude toward them. Even after several friendly interactions, they merely supported our future without putting pressure on marriage or parenting, maintaining an appropriate distance. When the topic of living together eventually came up, we were dreaming of building our own home. "I actually inherited a house from my grandfather," I revealed, and my in-laws listened intently and nodded. I received special affection from my grandfather, the only grandchild, and he left me a beautifully renovated house and land. My grandfather passed away just after the inheritance procedures were completed. The land, benefiting from redevelopment, was in a great location, and its real estate value was rapidly increasing. With knowledge in the real estate business, I knew that it would be more beneficial for us to sell it rather than live there ourselves. That way we would have sufficient funds for our dream home project. While I was grateful for my grandfather's profound love, the will allowed us to freely dispose of the house, so we were considering selling it. We started a new life on that land after getting married. However, due to the distance from our workplaces, it was difficult to live there permanently, no matter how good the location was. While preparing to sell the property, something unexpected happened. My husband, a salesperson, was suddenly assigned a transfer. His company, a large corporation with several branches nationwide, decided to transfer him, despite knowing we were newlyweds, because they deemed he was the only right candidate. I will definitely come back on holidays. Plus, my parents plan to visit, so don't overexert yourself. But could you take them out sometimes? I don't mind going out with them since your parents are kind. However, selling the house might take a bit longer. Since I had work too, it was decided that my husband would relocate alone. Even with the sudden turn of events, I suppressed my loneliness and anxiety and decided to wait for the day we could live together again. Like my husband promised, my mother-in-law would visit often, especially on the weekends. She once shared her experience of spending time alone multiple times while raising young children during her husband's business trips. Even without children, you can create family memories. Do you want to go out together? A little shopping might cheer you up. Let's go, Hannah. Thanks to my mother-in-law's thoughtfulness, I was able to spend time without feeling lonely, and my weekends became busier with various activities. However, as time passed, a concerning pattern began to emerge. Every weekend, without fail, my mother-in-law would almost certainly take me out somewhere. It was fine at first, but after a month, her invitations became increasingly forceful, showing little consideration for my health or household chores. When I mentioned I'd like to rest this weekend, she would sulk as if I was being selfish. But it'll be fun to go out together. You don't dislike going out with me, do you? She would ask. No, it's not like that. It's just that since we've been going out every week, I thought you might need some rest too, I would respond. My mother-in-law's face would turn gloomy. Even when I tried to clear the misunderstanding, she wouldn't listen. Once I reluctantly agreed, she would quickly regain her smile and act as if she had forgotten her persistent invitations. But doubts about her behavior slowly grew bigger in my mind. The places she took me often involved expensive spending. Brand name shopping followed by expensive meals, and the payment was always passed on to me. My mother-in-law would often leave the store before me, making it my responsibility to settle the bill. There were no thanks or reimbursements afterward. Indeed, I owned a house and had a stable salary, so I was financially comfortable. However, my husband and I had always lived frugally, so I felt uneasy about my mother-in-law's lavish spending. On occasions when my father-in-law joined, my expenses would increase even further. I felt the need to address this situation, but found it difficult to discuss with my husband. He had promised he would definitely return home, but that promise was challenging to fulfill due to his busy schedule at the new location. Are you okay with going out with Mom every week? Any concerns? My husband would ask over video calls, visibly tired from work. Hesitant to bring up my issues with my mother-in-law, I would pretend to be fine. Your mom is really kind to me. Take care of yourself, Tyler. I'm fine, so don't worry, I would reassure him. Yet, I lacked the courage to refuse the financial demands from my in-laws. Their behavior became excessive, and when I mentioned I couldn't go out one day, they made a surprising suggestion. Then, could you lend us a bit of money? Am I supposed to provide the money? Just a little is fine. We've already made a reservation at a restaurant. We'll invite another friend, but we're short on cash and need your help. To avoid conflict, I decided to lend them the money. I took out the money and gave it to them, but I never mentioned their request in front of my husband. Maybe you should talk to Tyler about it? I suggested casually to my mother-in-law, only to be shocked by her response. It would be embarrassing to talk to Tyler about such things. They felt ashamed to ask their eldest son but had no qualms about asking me. Resigned, I accepted my mother-in-law's demands, and financially supporting them became seemingly normal. The money I gave them as an allowance at least stopped her from forcing me to go out. I understood the issue was escalating but struggled with ineffective conversations and personal exhaustion. My mother-in-law's behavior became increasingly incomprehensible and bizarre. She would show up unannounced, inspecting my home as if it were her own, causing me to fear my privacy was being invaded. "Was this something left by your grandfather, Hannah? This furniture is lovely. It's amazing to have such quality items." Some furniture included antiques my grandfather cherished. My mother-in-law was fascinated by them, often admiring and treating them as if they were her own during her visits. This place was a shared space between my husband and me. I finally decided to discuss my mother-in-law's actions with my husband. While uncertain how he would react, I hoped for advice on handling her behavior. Her actions were unpleasant, and even if she was family, invading our private life was unacceptable. Nevertheless, a faint hope blossomed in my heart when the date of my husband Tyler's return from his solo assignment was determined. The financial demands from my in-laws would end if I just endured it for a little bit more. I was eagerly awaiting the reunion with my husband, but the situation took an unforeseen turn. Tyler suddenly what? My mind froze. The news came from a colleague at his assignment location, and I rushed to the hospital immediately. We don't know if it was due to overwork or an unexpected heart issue, but Tyler had collapsed. Despite being rushed to the emergency room, Tyler couldn't be saved. My beloved husband, always in perfect health, had departed from this world way too suddenly. Unable to accept this reality, the day of the funeral came. I barely remember that time, shrouded in profound sorrow. My brother-in-law came to help, taking care of the minutiae. "Thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to rely on you at a time like this." "What are you talking about? It's my brother's funeral. Besides, is everything okay with the land? Is the house ready?" After the funeral, while tidying up, I had a deep conversation with my brother-in-law. I nodded, responding, "Everything is settled." Days after my husband's funeral, my in-laws came to our house together. However, it was clear they weren't there to offer condolences. "It's truly unfortunate that our son passed away so suddenly, but don't worry, we're here for you. Everything will be all right." My mother-in-law's face curiously bore a smile. More shockingly, she had arranged a truck loaded with furniture and belongings from her home. I was struck silent by the shock and confusion. Clearly, this was a move-in, not a visit. Without any forewarning, my in-laws intended to move into our house. The reason for their actions was unfathomable. Yet, the answer to my questions quickly became apparent. "Are you aiming for our land?" The anxiety I had long harbored slipped out. When I asked, my mother-in-law coldly replied with a laugh. "The value of this property has increased significantly. We've always wanted it. As a matter of fact, your marriage was only approved because you inherited this. We agreed to the marriage because you were the heir." Filled with despair, I lost my voice. "So, you mean to live with me?" What a ridiculous question. To such an inquiry, my mother-in-law coldly retorted. Tyler's sudden death was an immeasurable shock, but, in reality, even without his death, my mother-in-law had planned to take over this house eventually. They intended to drive me out and become the new owners of this land. And she seemed to misunderstand that I had already decided to leave this place. "Now that my son has passed away, you'll return to your parents' place, right? It'd be sad if this house was left empty, so we'll live here. You don't need to worry at all." The moment my mother-in-law's expression turned into a sinister smile, anxiety swirled within me. Yet, I mustered the courage to correct her misunderstanding. "I've already sold the house." Without mocking my mother-in-law's assumption, I barely managed to explain while suppressing my smile. My mother-in-law stood dumbfounded, uttering, "What?" Just then, a new moving company truck arrived. "Excuse me, we have a delivery for this address." Another moving company had already parked there, causing confusion as the newly arrived workers asked us for clarification. The movers my mother-in-law hired came to us, realizing they couldn't begin their work, and the situation became chaotic. I urged my in-laws to explain the situation, but they were flustered and unable to provide clear answers. Realizing that arguing wouldn't solve anything, I began to regain my composure. I immediately instructed the movers my mother-in-law hired to leave the premises. This residence has already been purchased by someone else, and the contract is complete. A new family is moving in, so it wouldn't be appropriate to bring in someone else's belongings, right? The movers were visibly shocked by this development, when suddenly a luxury car arrived. A seemingly wealthy couple and their children got out of the car. This house was no longer mine. The family that emerged from the car was the new owners of the home. My in-laws were bewildered by the situation, struggling to grasp what was happening. "Please move the truck. We need to start unloading for the new residents." After the truck my mother-in-law called was moved, the other movers began their work swiftly, starting to bring in the new furniture that had been purchased. My in-laws, unable to accept this change, started to obstinately block the entrance. The new homeowners, keeping their family safe inside the car, approached me to clarify the situation. "Who are these people? This is the house we bought. Please have the truck removed immediately." Surprised by my in-laws' unexpected visit, I apologized and tried to calm the situation down. However, my in-laws were adamant, forcefully trying to enter the house. The interior of the house had completely changed from what they remembered. All the furniture we used was gone. My mother-in-law was shocked by the scene, becoming agitated and causing a commotion. "What is the meaning of this? The house is empty. Even the antique furniture and lights that I cherished are all gone. Explain this." She was furious, unable to comprehend the current situation. The silence was suddenly broken by the new owner's angry shout, "I'll call the police." That outcry acted like a start signal, prompting my father-in-law to hurriedly pull my mother-in-law away and leave the scene quickly. After a short while, my mother-in-law, who had been agitated by the events, gradually regained her composure. Meanwhile, I expressed my apologies to the new residents, feeling a strong sense of responsibility. To ensure such troubles wouldn't recur in the future, I had the new residents record detailed information about my in-laws, including their contact details and names, managing to defuse the situation. At that moment, I felt a profound sense of exhaustion throughout my body, but it wasn't over yet. I went to my in-laws to explain calmly that our move had already been completed just before my husband had passed away. We planned to sell this house from the beginning, along with the land, so everything is proceeding as scheduled, I told them. This plan had been on hold temporarily due to my husband's transfer, but ultimately, everything progressed smoothly. Behind the smooth transition was a crucial factor. My brother-in-law, struggling with the never-ending financial demands from my in-laws and not wanting to burden my husband with worries, my brother-in-law was a savior to me. He had long been troubled by the poor relationship with his parents and had told me to consult him anytime if I had any issues. With that information, my brother-in-law actively intervened in our problems. Following his advice, I concluded that selling the land early was the best strategy to avoid losing the property to my in-laws, even though it was a valuable inheritance from my grandfather. Determined to maintain the peaceful relationship built between my husband and in-laws, I promised my brother-in-law to keep it a secret, ensuring peace within the family. With great courage, I opened up and shared all the events with him. Upon hearing this, my brother-in-law's expression turned to anger, showing his strong resentment towards his parents. My brother-in-law, who worked at the same place as me, was aware of the schemes his parents had been plotting and disclosed the truth to me. He passionately explained that Tyler, his brother, was the most important family member to him in the world, and as Tyler's wife, I was also an invaluable part of his family. My parents are either planning to live in that house themselves or waiting for a convenient opportunity to evict you and Tyler and eventually take over the property, he told me with a serious tone to his voice. According to my brother-in-law, my in-laws were extravagant, lacked common sense, were overly concerned with appearances, and wouldn't hesitate to use any means to achieve their goals. Regarding my mother-in-law, she was notably self-centered, lacking in compassion, and her behavior often disregarded others. While she always acted politely in public, her true nature was selfish, and she couldn't be described as genuinely kind. Learning about the true sides and everyday behavior of my in-laws from my brother-in-law was incredibly shocking for me. They always put on a good front in front of Tyler, the family's eldest son, so my husband was completely unaware of their characteristics or plans. My brother-in-law strongly advised that we quickly put the house on the market and sell it to prevent losing it due to my in-law's scheme. Convinced by his persuasion, we recognized the importance of selling the house and decided to proceed with the sale promptly, even if it meant parting with a valuable property inherited from my beloved grandfather, if it became a barrier for our relationship as a couple. It was a decision made prioritizing family harmony. I strongly wished to avoid leaving a source of discord for the future, especially due to the property's value. This decision was by no means an arbitrary one. My husband and I had discussed this matter extensively while he was still alive, and he fully agreed with it. He understood my predicament of not being able to consult anyone, and upon learning about his parents' actions, he firmly stated that he could never condone their behavior. He told me, "I'm sorry for not realizing this. Hannah, if you're okay with it, let's sell the house before my parents can do anything. I'm really sorry to let go of the precious house inherited from your grandfather. No, if it prevents future problems. I believe my grandfather would support this decision." I responded. My decision was not to prioritize the relationship with my in-laws, but to protect the future me and my husband were supposed to have together. Throughout the selling process, my brother-in-law, who was well-versed in real estate, spared no effort in finding the most suitable buyer. My tasks were to find a new residence and move as soon as possible, ensuring that my in-laws wouldn't notice while maintaining my usual daily life. The house, slightly worn from our use, was almost as good as new, which we considered when setting the price. As a result, an appropriate buyer appeared surprisingly quickly, and the process progressed smoothly. The family that just arrived became the new owners of the house. Our original plan was to eagerly await Tyler's return, but fate forced a change in plans. Tyler was also pleased with the sale of the house, and that was my only consolation. The way the movers moved the furniture in so quickly was like a precision machine in action. Meanwhile, my in-laws, forced to leave the property, watched a moving scene in astonishment. When their hired movers angrily demanded explanations amidst the confusion, my in-laws were at a loss for words. For the movers, it was an incomprehensible situation of overlapping moving tasks, declaring it a contractual violation and confronting my in-laws, who failed to provide a proper explanation. Eventually, the furniture was returned to the original place, but the unexpected situation incurred additional charges. Seemingly grasping the situation, my mother-in-law approached me, pleading in a trembling voice, considering the home was my eldest son's wife's inheritance. It should also belong to us. No. This situation is absurd. However, her futile attempts and excuses had no impact on me. I completely ignored their arguments and decided to leave with my belongings. The property now belonged to the new family, and I had no obligation or right to answer any further. After Tyler's funeral, where I encountered my in-laws, they seemed eager to discuss the house issue but ultimately left quietly without saying anything. I had no obligation to convey anything to my in-laws and had almost no words to exchange with them. Now, in my new residence, I am leading a peaceful life. In this small house, where we were originally supposed to start anew, I was faced with deep sorrow due to his absence. The savings from selling the house were substantial, but without my husband, the dream of building a new home had vanished. I returned to work, cherishing the precious memories with my husband, and am gradually regaining a positive outlook. As for my in-laws, particularly my mother-in-law, it seems that unresolved grievances were accumulating. However, I had no desire to engage with them any further and had not shared my new address. With no possibility of contacting me, my mother-in-law's frustrations only grew. Although she once boasted to her eldest son, she was now unable to visit my brother-in-law and remained unaware of my whereabouts. The pressure built up, and my mother-in-law finally lost her mind. In the dead of night, she scattered gasoline around the vicinity of the sold property. Fortunately, a local resident who happened to pass by became suspicious and immediately stopped her, preventing anything major from happening. When reported to the police, it was discovered that she had prepared newspapers and a lighter, and my mother-in-law was arrested for attempted arson. The homeowner, who almost became the victim of arson, was so angry that they threatened to sue me as well after learning who the intrusive woman was. I apologized repeatedly, but since it was an attempted arson, there was nothing I could do about the crime my mother-in-law committed. Ultimately, her obsession with the house led to her prosecution. Through multiple apologies, I managed to seek forgiveness and promised to ensure such an incident would never happen again. My mother-in-law was raised in a pampered environment, accustomed to getting whatever she wanted. Facing a situation where she couldn't have that house, frustration and jealousy emerged. She reluctantly began to resent the house and land, resorting to crime, which eventually led her to get imprisoned. My father-in-law, who was normally supportive, started to constantly quarrel with her after the arrest and ultimately chose to abandon her and get a divorce. As a result, my mother-in-law completely lost a home to return to after her sentence. However, this can also be seen as the consequence of her own choices. My brother-in-law felt lonely after losing his brother but comforted me, saying, "I can endure it, because I still have you." The relationship with my in-laws had ended, but that didn't mean I had lost all my family. Determined to aim for a peaceful everyday life, also for my late husband watching over me from heaven, I moved forward. "Hey, Dina, have you washed these sheets properly? They smell like you," said my father-in-law as he laid on the sheets. If we had lived together, I might have experienced such bizarre scenes every day. Just the thought of it gives me the shivers. The divorce that resulted from this living arrangement marked the start of my new life. I am Dina. I am 60 years old and divorced. Others may think differently, but I believe that at 60, I still have a lot ahead of me. I taught myself how to use a computer, which was once a challenge, by reading books. I always want to be an enthusiastic woman who doesn't give up because of her age. Compete with the younger ones? No, I am still young, actually. But even I have faced tough times. The incident happened when I finally finished paying off the house mortgage. This was over a decade ago. I had contributed to the purchase of the house with my husband, Jim, in our 20s, and we had just finished paying off the mortgage. Jim said, "Maybe we should consider living together?" "What do you mean by that?" "You know what I mean. Living with my parents. I've said this many times, but it's a bit difficult." "Why?" "To be honest, I don't think your mother likes me very much. Living together would be hard for both her and me. The way things are now is best." "That might be true, but we won't know unless we try," said Jim. "Once we start living together, it won't be easy to stop, will it? You always seem to shy away from challenges." "Challenges, huh?" Ever since we got married, he often suggested living with his parents. Before marriage, he was firmly against cohabitation, so I felt relieved. But after marriage, he gradually started saying living together might be nice. It's like a scam. I later found out that his mother often told him, "What will you do when we get old?" It's worrying. Before I knew it, Jim started feeling a strange sense of duty, thinking living together is my responsibility as a son, a way of loving my parents. I wish he'd feel that not living together is also his responsibility as a husband. I think it's important to care for his parents, but he keeps insisting on living together even though I don't get along with his mother. Holding back my emotions, my relationship with my thoughtless has been gradually worsened, but he seemed completely unconcerned. As the remaining amount on our house mortgage decreased, his suggestions for living together with his parents intensified. I had ignored his words until then, but this was a warning sign. Feeling an impending sense of crisis, one day, I went to the door at the sound of the intercom and was shocked when I opened it. "Hello," said my smiling mother-in-law and father-in-law standing there. It was 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The sunlight illuminated their smiling faces. It was like a holy scene, but that couldn't be so. Stunned by their sudden visit, I stood there frozen. Then Jim appeared behind me, welcomed them with "welcome back," and led them inside. "Wait, welcome back? What's going on? Aren't visitors supposed to say excuse us, and the hosts, please come in?" Then Jim's familiar words came to mind. "Let's live together with my parents." This was bad. Confused, I followed them into the house. Then, I saw my mother-in-law carefully examining the china cabinet. "What are you doing?" I asked impulsively. Look at this scratch. It's a pity to buy a new one, but doesn't it bother you, Dina? Aren't you a bit careless? I wish you'd use it more carefully." "What?" I chose this. I looked at the spot she was observing, but couldn't see any scratches. Maybe she saw the wood grain as scratches because of presbyopia? But I have presbyopia too, and I don't see it that way. However, my mother-in-law has always made such baseless accusations against me. Maybe she just can't like me because I stole her son, but I'm not convinced either. Well, I'll just let it slide as usual. Then I realized I couldn't see my father-in-law. Hearing a noise from upstairs, I went up with a bad feeling. And there he was, lying on my bed instead of my husband's, face down. I screamed in surprise. And without any shame, he said, "Oh, Dina, are the sheets clean? They smell like you," and laughed. Wait. You absolutely can't do this. Please stop that." I blurted out without any hesitation. What do you mean by that? Why are you, a daughter-in-law, being so impudent?" shouted my father-in-law. "It's not about being a daughter-in-law. Why are you sniffing around in someone else's bed?" I raised my voice. "I'm just checking if they've been washed properly. There's absolutely no need for that." I strongly argued back. "No, it's necessary. As someone who will live in this house, it's an essential check." What are you talking about? I really don't understand what you mean," I said, confused. The thought of living with such a disrespectful daughter-in-law worries me. Living together. I was shocked and lost for words. Suddenly, my husband Jim and my mother-in-law appeared before me. I wondered why it was so noisy. "And here you are," said Jim. "Jim, your father says he's going to live with us. Is that true?" I asked my husband. "Yes, exactly as it sounds," Jim answered. "What? Really? The house mortgage is going to be finally paid off this month, right?" "Yes, that's right, but so I've decided that we'll live here with my parents." "What? Why would you decide such a major thing on your own?" "No, I've been asking about living together for a while now. I told you firmly oppose it. I can't accept living under the same roof as someone who sniffs other people's sheets." I argued strongly. "Did you say that?" I clenched my fists, feeling a mix of surprise and anger. "Besides, I've been seeing another girl for a while now. So, I don't really need to live with you." "What? That's unbelievable." "Well, anyone would prefer a young and cute girl over a wife who won't live with her in-laws." I wondered what he was talking about, but there was more to be shocked about. "If you don't like it, that's fine. Once the mortgage is paid off, we don't need you anymore," my mother-in-law said with a smile. "What?" I asked again in shock. "That's right. You're no longer needed. Now get out," my father-in-law said, grinning and gesturing as if shooing away a dog. So, I was just a tool to help with mortgage payments to them for a long time. Jim's income alone was uncertain, and both incomes were needed to get a new house and pay off the mortgage quickly. My mother-in-law had endured her son's marriage to me, always hoping for and waiting to be able to live together. Once the mortgage was paid off, she probably thought she could live with her son again. To them, I was useful like a servant until no longer needed. The more I understood the situation, the angrier I became. I regretted not doing anything until it got to that point. But the house was also important to me. There was no reason for me to be cornered like this. But wait a minute. A sudden idea flashed in my mind, and a light shone in my heart that was filled with despair and irritation. All right, let's all live together. What? My quick response surprised Jim and my mother-in-law the most. They might have thought I would leave easily, but they were taken aback by my unexpected answer. A life with a husband, his affair partner, and in-laws sounds fun, doesn't it? My mother-in-law and Jim's reactions to my statement were so funny that I laughed. But of course, that was just a joke. Who would live together? Of course, I'm leaving, I said. They probably didn't expect me to leave so easily. They must have thought I would beg to stay. Jim was unsettled until the moment I left the house, but I ignored him and eventually finalized our divorce. About a month later, having lost the house and enjoying my free time in a hotel after the divorce, I received a call from my ex-mother-in-law. I really need to see you, she said, though it seemed troublesome. I had a hunch, so I agreed to meet her. When I arrived at the cafe for our appointment, there sat my former in-laws with gloomy faces. As soon as they saw me, my mother-in-law tearfully said, "Dina, thank you for coming." Well, the whole family gathered. "What do you need from your ex-daughter-in-law?" We received a notice yesterday about the division of property. Of course, we're divorced, so we need to discuss property division properly, right? Did you think I wouldn't respond? What? Well, but the situation has changed now. The situation? I repeated the question, and Jim's dejected figure seemed even more disheartened. Jim's company has finally gone bankrupt. Is that so? I thought that might happen. I clapped my hands and said with a smile, "I knew it." Dina, what do you mean by "I knew it"? Jim's income has been decreasing year by year, and last month, there was a delay in his salary payment. That's a sign of a company going under. Such a thing happened. Jim, why didn't you say anything? My mother-in-law's face was filled with anger towards her son. Jim let out a small leap and looked frightened. Well, I never thought the company would fail. People usually notice such things. You're just ignorant, I sharply pointed out, and Jim looked up in surprise, saying what? Immediately, I asked everyone, "So, you all gathered here to tell me that Jim has lost his job and can't contribute to the property division? Surely that's not the case, right?" Everyone was at a loss for words. Well, Jim was the first to speak up. Our house burned down. What? The house, it burned down. I get that. But how did it happen? It was Dad's cigarette. Huh. Ha ha ha. Living with your parents led to a huge loss. Huh? That stuff. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. I had anticipated Jim losing his job. When divorcing, I thought to myself, I don't want to support such an irresponsible, unemployed husband, and living with his parents would bring more problems. There are also issues when caring for the elderly. So, divorcing was the best choice for me. But I never imagined that his father would burn down the house. This could be the perfect opportunity to speak. A mischievous idea awakened in me. Haha, I'm sorry, but it must be really tough for you. Since Dad and Mom left their home, they have nowhere to live and we don't know what to do. Jim said, truly unemployed and homeless now. Please stop saying things like that. I'm also living in a hotel at the moment, so I'm practically homeless too. But that will change soon as I'm about to get my own place. Really? Everyone was surprised at my news of purchasing a new home. Just the reaction I expected. You know that high-rise apartment near the station? I'm moving there soon. A high-rise apartment. Jim's and my in-laws' faces changed completely. Maybe a high-rise apartment is everyone's dream? For me, I chose it just because it has good security. I wasn't interested in higher floors and chose a lower one to avoid the stress of waiting for elevators. What? We want to live there, too. Dina, can we live with you? Please. Forget everything that happened before. Really, Dina? I'm asking to. As expected, my in-laws shamelessly asked to live in the ex-daughter-in-law's house. Their audacity was astounding. Could it be that my father-in-law planned to burn down the apartment as well? I'd like to help, but after all, I was just an unnecessary existence for you all. Just a wallet for mortgage payments. As I spoke sarcastically, my in-laws hurriedly started praising me. We've always admired your housekeeping skills. You certainly brighten up the home. You're thoughtful and beautiful. In contrast, our son was spoiled and grew up to be unemployed, and we can't handle him. Their only son, my ex-husband, was speechless watching them. Even a beloved son becomes unnecessary if he lacks the ability to support them. Such cruel parental thinking. Hey, living with so many people might not be bad, I said, and Jim and his parents looked surprised. It might be lively. Dina, what do you mean? Jim asked. Oh, I mean just what I said. As I smiled kindly, everyone's faces brightened. It's just, it might be a bit awkward to live with a divorced husband again. As I said this, my mother-in-law responded, Oh, that's true. Don't worry about it. Jim doesn't need to live with you. She said cheerfully. What? Jim was shocked. That's right. Jim can live somewhere else. We can live together with you. My father-in-law chimed in. Wait a minute, Dad, Mom. Why are you leaving me out? Jim protested. Because we can pay Dina for food with our pension, but you can't, his father explained. So, they planned to forcibly live in the high-rise apartment and only paid for meals. I was about to say that, but chose to remain silent and observe the family discord I had instigated. Go ahead, fools, play right into my hands. Then, if you both are receiving pensions, you should find another place to live. We can't afford such wastefulness without a job, not knowing what our future holds. What future are you talking about? You're already in your twilight years. You're an elderly couple with unsteady feet. How rude. We're still healthy. If you're healthy, find a job and use that income for the future. I can't even take a bath or go to job interviews in my current state. Clean yourself in the river. You're always thinking only for yourself. What? You're saying that when you don't do it yourself, you're a failure, an arsonist. Who's the failure? You, the useless son, unemployed and worthless. We don't need you. We're cutting ties. That's fine. I'd rather not have parents who disregard their son. During this family argument, tension filled the air between Jim and his parents. My mother-in-law, in a soft voice, tried to calm my father-in-law. You don't really mean to cut ties, do you? However, Jim's firm stance only fueled his father's anger further, and he refused to retract his decision to sever ties with him. Moreover, my father-in-law jokingly said to me, This makes the room bigger, huh? His words hinted that he had fully accepted a new life in the high-rise apartment, planning to live in my home. I asked with a bit of sarcasm, Can't you misunderstanding something? Everyone looked at me in surprise. The size of the room hasn't changed from the beginning. I have no intention of living with you all, I calmly stated. What do you mean by that, Dina? Asked my father-in-law. I replied indifferently, It doesn't have any deep meaning. I just said that having many people around would make life lively. Nothing more, nothing less. At that moment, my mother-in-law objected, What? But from your words, it felt like you were considering living with us. I raised my voice slightly. It's quite interesting to see you two so easily choose life in a high-rise apartment over your son. Jim always disregarded my opinions and wanted to live with you, but what about now? Isn't it time to realize how unreasonable your proposals have been, Jim? Can't you see the reality even after your house has burned down? Then Jim looked at his parents with deep anger. Indeed, you're right, Dina. I believed in giving back to my parents, but it seems they never thought the same of me. Wait, Jim. My in-laws couldn't hide their surprise at his statement. Jim, I was wrong. Let's forget the estrangement. So, Father, you just want to rely on your son because you can't live in my house, right? What? No, that's not it. Do you really think so? You seem clearly unsettled. As I smiled and said this, my father-in-law began to panic. Seeing this, Jim's anger became more apparent. I don't need such parents. Estrangement it is. Jim shouted angrily, and his parents begged frantically, please listen, but he wouldn't hear them. Instead, he turned to me. Thanks to you, I've come to realize I want to start over. What, really? Yes, I'm serious. You did all this to wake me up, right? Haha. Stop it. That's too convenient for you. What, why? I just thought it might be fun to see someone who abandoned his wife to get along with his parents now struggling with them. What? You're just an object of property division to me now. What? Property division? You really plan to demand that in this situation? This situation? That's irrelevant. It's obvious. I signed the divorce papers quickly to leave the house, but property division can still be claimed after divorce, so I intend to take it seriously. Wait, hey, don't you love me anymore? What charm could someone without an address or a stable job possibly have? Your head's empty too. I can't believe it. Later, unable to reconcile with me, Jim raged at his parents. This is all your fault. Before the police arrived, I left the scene. And then, I did exactly as I said and pursued the property division. Honestly, it wasn't a large amount, but it marked the complete end of my relationship with Jim. Jim, now without an address or job, struggled with reduced savings due to the property division and became estranged from his parents. He seems to be living a wandering life, moving from various places, doing odd jobs daily, staying in cheap lodgings, sometimes even sleeping in parks. Unable to find stable work due to his age, he's leading a nomadic life. His parents didn't repair their relationship with their son and decided to live on their pension alone, essentially disowning him. They have always been a couple only concerned with themselves. Meanwhile, I have been living a relatively affluent life due to my investment activities I started before the divorce. Recently, I began attending a local programming school to improve my computer skills. I'm the only one in my age group, but I'm surrounded by children, making me feel like I have many grandchildren. Though I never had children, I find warmth in being surrounded by children in this way. A primary school girl named Tracy seems interested in knitting, and I sometimes teach her during breaks at the school. Watching her and other children join in knitting together brings a smile to my face. Despite a life full of ups and downs, I plan to continue living a life that's true to myself. I am Claire and I am 30 years old. I've been married for 2 years now, juggling my duties as a working housewife. I met my husband, Scott, at work, and now we live a happy life together. I wish I could say everything is perfect, but currently, I'm troubled by financial issues. Recently, my in-laws moved into a new house, but my brother-in-law, Eric, made an impossible promise for it, saying he would buy them the house. Eric's income is low. He quits jobs soon after starting and constantly changes them. Now, he's working at a company where he's overworked and underpaid. However, he's never been in debt before, so he managed to get approved for a 35-year mortgage. He then got carried away and bought my in-laws a new car, taking out a 10-year loan for it. Eric came begging to Scott, kneeling and saying, "I won't cause any more trouble." He asked Scott, "Can you help a little? Just $200 a month is enough." Scott is kind and easily persuaded. Even though $200 may seem manageable with your income, it's still not a small amount. Besides, we were against Eric taking out a loan in the first place. I tried to persuade him, but Scott said, "I owe my brother. Helping him out a bit is fine. I'll pay with my money, so don't worry." Scott told me that when he was a child, he got lost in the mountains and Eric found and saved him. Since then, Eric often uses his position as a lifesaver to make various demands on Scott. After Scott agreed to help with the loan payments, Eric's demands escalated. The agreement to pay only $200 a month soon increased by $100 each month, and we ended up covering 90% of the payments. Scott's monthly allowance couldn't cover it, so I had to contribute while saving money. I don't waste money, so I could afford to pay this amount. But honestly, I don't want to spend unnecessarily, especially since I want to have children in the future. Hey, wasn't the deal just $200? I can't understand how it came to this. It's okay now because I'm working, but what if I can't work anymore after having kids? We won't be able to pay then. That's true. Okay, I'll tell my brother that we can't pay after we have a child. Promise me. I can't forgive this even now. Scott called Eric to arrange that the payment would stop once we had a child. After that, I started trying to conceive. I didn't want to pay for Eric anymore. And then I got pregnant. Finally, I'm free from helping with Eric's repayments. I felt relieved. I didn't want to get pregnant in this situation, but it was the only way to change things. Then Scott made a suggestion. Claire, I've been thinking. Maybe you'll agree with this idea. What's going on? Can you tell me more about it? Actually, Scott's suggestion was a great idea. I was initially anxious, but I agreed to his proposal, thinking that if any problems arose, my child and I could escape. When I was 5 months pregnant, we didn't renew our apartment lease and decided to live with my in-laws. My in-laws were delighted, and I commuted from their house until I finally went on maternity leave. It's good to be dedicated to work, but don't push yourself too hard for the sake of the child. I couldn't fully accept my mother-in-law's concern. We're paying part of the mortgage, so it'll be tough without income. My mother-in-law smiled at my response. To be honest, I thought it was unfair to ask Eric to pay the mortgage. It's reassuring to know you two are helping. Her words made me slightly suspicious. It seemed like she didn't want Eric to pay, but it was fine if we did. I tried to forget her words, thinking it might be a misunderstanding. After that, I built a good relationship with my mother-in-law. There were no typical mother-in-law issues, and my father-in-law was a gentle person. I was initially worried, but then I was glad we lived together. I had no idea then that I would see an unpleasant side of my in-laws. Eventually, I gave birth. I planned to take a year off for childcare. Thinking that I wouldn't have to pay 90% of the mortgage anymore lightened my spirits. But Scott showed me a message with a worried look. It was a one-sided message from Eric. Sorry, I couldn't stick to the job again. I'm working part-time at an inn in the countryside. I'll pay 20% of the mortgage as usual, so please transfer the rest to my account as before. Please. Scott sent several messages, but Eric ignored them and didn't even read them. When Scott tried calling, Eric had blocked his number. What are we going to do? We need to raise our daughter, right? Let's ask your parents to pay part of the mortgage. We can't afford it with just your salary. You're right. I'll talk to them. You have to. It doesn't matter if we owe them. We need to find Eric and make him pay. As I expressed my anger, Scott went to his parents' room with a wry smile. But it didn't go well. When Scott suggested that they help with the mortgage, his parents got angry and came to me. Scott stood behind them, looking awkward. You said you wanted to support Eric and agreed to pay part of the mortgage. Keep your promise. I retorted angrily to my father-in-law's words. Just to let you know, we never wanted to make these loan payments in the first place. It was Eric who forced this situation on us. It's because he irresponsibly took out a loan that we've had to rely on Scott. At these words, my mother-in-law began to defend Eric. How can you be so cold-hearted? They're brothers, after all. Shouldn't it be fine if they share the financial burden? Can't you be a little more filial? It was you who made Scott ask us for money, wasn't it? Kind-hearted Scott would never say such a thing. It's true that I said I didn't want to make any more payments. But Eric initially said that contributing $200 would be enough, and that was only supposed to be until our child was born. But that agreement was broken, so shouldn't you help out? We never said we wouldn't pay anything. Well, how cheeky. I don't mind being cheeky. If Scott and Eric were sharing the burden equally, I could understand. But we are paying 90% of it. It's us who are suffering because Eric suddenly said he would handle the loan. Even after I said all this, my in-laws didn't seem to understand. Don't be so arrogant over such a small amount of money. As a daughter-in-law, you should just obediently follow what Scott and we say. At that moment, Scott, who was always gentle and calm, changed his expression. I felt a chill down my spine. The saying, the gentler the person, the scarier they are when angry, came to mind. Scott, still smiling, began to speak. All right, I understand. Then, we will leave this house. The reason we moved in was that I was worried about leaving Claire alone after she gave birth. Claire's parents had always said we could live with them, so we'll move out once we're ready. I nodded vigorously at Scott's words, feeling relieved. Actually, that had been our intention from the beginning. If we were going to pay the loan, we agreed to live with Scott's family under certain conditions. I didn't want to live with my in-laws, but I agreed to do so under the conditions Scott set. The condition was that if the in-laws sided with Eric, we would immediately leave their house and stop paying the loan. We had already contacted my parents, and they said we could come to them anytime if anything happened. The in-laws, still not understanding, said confidently, "Do as you like." 3 days later, we packed our belongings and headed to my parents' house. Actually, both our workplaces were closer to my parents' house, so it was more convenient. When we arrived, my parents warmly welcomed us, and my favorite dishes were prepared. My daughter also received a lot of love, and although Scott was initially nervous and careful, he began to bond with my father, drinking and laughing together every night. About a month later, my in-laws and Eric stormed into my parents' house. Apparently, Eric had gone back to his parents' house, complaining about Scott not transferring the money. And then the three of them came to demand payment for the loan. We dealt with them without letting them inside. "Why didn't you transfer the money?" They said they couldn't make the withdrawal. "If there's a shortfall, you should pay it yourself. Is that how you treat your benefactor?" So arrogant. Benefactor, huh? How long do I have to be grateful? If anything, I feel like I've helped my brother out more times than I can count. What did you say? You're alive today thanks to me. Have you forgotten that day? Eric raised his voice in anger, trying to overpower Scott. Perhaps he thought that gentle Scott would comply if he yelled. I couldn't stand it anymore, and before Scott could say anything, I shouted back at Eric. Enough is enough. Can you stop threatening us with the past? We've repaid our debt to you. More importantly, why did you sign up for the house and car loans for your parents all by yourself? It was to repay my parents for all they've done. That's a lie. There were other ways, like a parent-child relay loan. I know you told Scott that your annual income isn't even $30,000 and you weren't sure if you'd pass the loan review. My words left my in-laws with shocked expressions. Eric, what do you mean your income isn't $30,000? Was it a lie when you said you had changed jobs and were earning over $80,000 and we could rest easy? Hey, Eric, answer properly. As my mother-in-law pressed him, Eric paled and started sweating. That's not true. Where did you hear such a thing? Maybe Scott. Did you use the speakerphone? Maybe it was a misunderstanding. He tried to escape with an explanation, but it was too late. Scott played a voice recording from his smartphone of his conversation with Eric. I exaggerated about earning $80,000 when I didn't even make $30,000. I was hoping the loan review wouldn't go through, but it did. I can afford the loan payments. Can you help me? You owe me for saving your life, right? Scott stopped the recording and looked coldly at Eric. Gone was the usual gentle Scott. I'm the type who's curious about things. I record all my calls. Claire knew because she heard this recording, not because I used a speaker. It's thanks to me that you're here today. So, help me with what I want to do. Don't you want to be filial to your parents? I took out the loan intending to be. Maybe you helped him as a child, but we've repaid that debt. Please don't ask for more. We have a daughter now and need money for her future. You just want to look good in front of your parents, right? Then do it on your own. I said that as I was unable to contain my anger. Scott quietly patted my shoulder. Thanks, Claire. That's enough. Scott, since we were kids, our parents always favored Eric. I was always second. Eric probably took out the loan not really to be filial, but to curry favor with them. And he took out the loan knowing he couldn't pay it, planning to make us pay 90% of it. There's no reasoning with such people. So, we're cutting ties. Scott glared at his parents and Eric. Seeing this, my in-laws started to make a fuss. How dare you talk about cutting ties? You owe us. You should be filial to Eric and us. We raised you. That's right. Do you know how much money we spent so you could go to college? Pay the loan expenses as a way to repay us. Each time my in-laws said something, I grew more and more disgusted. If you keep causing a scene, I'll call the police. Please don't contact us anymore. With that, I forced all three outside and slammed the door shut. Soon after, the police arrived, and my in-laws and Eric left quietly. It seemed my parents had called 911 over 10 minutes ago, sensing the argument wouldn't end. Afterwards, we explained the situation to the police and sent them home. It seems that the police can't intervene much in family matters. We talked with my parents and decided to move out immediately. We found a new place easier than expected and started living in a new apartment with our daughter 2 weeks later. We told my parents our address and promised to visit occasionally, but we didn't tell Scott's parents or Eric anything. Scott changed his phone number and took steps to ensure that his parents and Eric couldn't contact him. Later, Eric apparently struggled with the loan payments and, along with his parents, managed to make the monthly repayments. Scott's father had already retired, and his mother had long been a housewife, enjoying a pensioner's life. However, due to the loan repayments, both had to start part-time jobs, leading to a tough life given their declining health. Eric returned to his parents' house and found a new job. He earned a minimal income, which angered his parents. A friend living near Scott's family told us that they're barely getting by, looking constantly downhearted. We are enjoying a comfortable life in our new apartment, just the three of us. Scott recently got a promotion, resulting in a slight salary increase. Sometimes, I thought you might always be under Eric's thumb. Remembering Eric suddenly, I asked Scott about it. For me, he was still an important family member. Even though he's like that, the treatment from our parents was unfair, but I valued them all because they were family. But I snapped when my father called the loan repayment a trifle. That's when I clearly realized that my real family is not them but you and our daughter. Haha, that's kind of nice to hear. Scott, you look so scary then. I was shocked. Just thinking about what they were saying to my precious family, I couldn't control my anger. Scott and I smiled at each other. While we were talking, our daughter started crying. Oh, what's wrong? I got up, picked her up, and left the bedroom. Scott has work tomorrow, so he needs to rest. I decided to focus on taking care of our daughter instead. I reaffirmed my desire to protect my precious family. When I asked, "Did you build this mansion, Laura?" my sister-in-law replied with a proud face, "Yes, it's a bit too big for living alone, but it's a spacious 3-room house designed for 2 generations. Maybe I should invite my boyfriend to stay on the first floor." I secretly smiled to myself at her words. She was probably lost in some distant dream. What's with that sudden laugh? It's creepy. My sister-in-law looked at me intently, puzzled by my smile. Her eyes held me as if seeing something unknown. Without breaking a smile, I shared a fact with my sister-in-law. My name is Victoria. I am an office worker nearing the milestone of my 40s. I married Edward, my boss in the same sales department, at the age of 30. Having lost my parents as a child and raised while moving between relatives' houses, I have no place to call my hometown. I revealed this fact to my husband early on, and he did not mind it and did not change in the way he treated me. My parents-in-law have always been warm ever since we were dating, often inviting me over for meals at their home. After marriage, my parents-in-law loved me like their own child, and it was natural for me to live in my husband's family home. "This is your new home," my mother-in-law declared, and I still remember my husband's warm smile and my father-in-law's bright expression. My newlywed life was ideal, except for one point. There was one person who disapproved of our marriage and me living with them, my sister-in-law, Laura. She is 3 years older than my husband, lives in the house, but leads an active nightlife and rarely meets us in our daily life. However, her room is often littered with luxury brand bags, and her belongings are carelessly scattered in the living room. Judging from her possessions, it can be inferred that she has quite a lot of money. but no one in the family knows her exact occupation. My parents-in-law tend to avoid the topic of my sister-in-law, and any questions are met with vague answers. My husband seems indifferent to her presence. Honestly, I don't get along with my sister-in-law. Whenever I saw her in the living room on my days off, my body stiffened and I froze. Oh gosh, a child from a Pua family is in the living room. I might catch bad luck and end up in poverty by being so close, she said, and I looked down while holding a bitten toast, unable to muster the courage to leave. My mother-in-law, who was next to me, admonished her, but it didn't seem to reach her. Laura simply brushed her flowing hair, looked down at me, and said, "You are a stranger to me. It would be troubling if you stay here forever." Her words pierced my heart. I apologized in a small voice, and she snorted and left the room. "Don't worry about it," my mother-in-law consoled me, but the fog in my heart didn't clear up. As my sister-in-law said, I'm not originally a member of this family. Even if it's the family I married into, I'm still an outsider. If only you were our child instead of Laura, my mother-in-law joked. It seemed that my parents-in-law and husband wished inside their hearts that my sister-in-law would leave the house, but there was no sign of that happening. I was unsure whether to tell my mother-in-law about a scene I witnessed recently. In the end, I decided to keep it to myself, fearing retaliation from my sister-in-law. I managed to force a smile in front of my mother-in-law while finishing a tasteless breakfast. Then came a long stretch of rainy days in the area we lived in. The old house seemed to be crying out in pain. There were leaks in the corridor previously, but never as badly as this time, and my mother-in-law could only smile wryly. The emergency repairs done by my father-in-law and husband were mostly ineffective, and the buckets placed around the house overflowed with rainwater, soaking the floors. Fortunately, our bedrooms and the living room were safe, and we could manage to live somehow. However, the problem was Laura's room. She hadn't been home for several days and would surely be surprised to see the state of her room. My mother-in-law and I had moved out her precious branded bags and watches from the room, but the room itself was as wet as if it had been exposed to the rain outside. It was impossible to even set foot in the room, let alone sleep in it. After moving everything out, we laid down blue tarps on the floor and stacks and bags at its entrance. We finished the work and sat down exhausted on the living room sofa. "Laura might have to spend some time in the living room for now," said my mother-in-law with a wary voice. As I nodded unconsciously, I noticed the door being opened forcefully. Turning around, there was Laura standing at the entrance, looking at us with an angry expression. Apparently having seen the disastrous state her room was in, with her hair and coat wet. "My room is unusable," she said in a low voice, barely containing her anger. My mother-in-law hesitated for a moment but then looked at her intently, regaining her composure. "You can't live in that room until the repairs are done, can you? So, use the living room on the first floor, or maybe this is an opportunity for you to become independent." "What? Why should I have to leave?" "The one who should leave is that poor person," she shouted while pointing at me. Caught off guard by suddenly being the topic of conversation, all I could do was toastari back at her. "You'll have to lend me your room. Pack your things and leave quickly." But to move so suddenly. As I spoke, my sister-in-law glared at my mother-in-law. "That would be fine with you, right, Mom? How about we stop pretending to be family with someone who got married into this house?" For just a moment, I looked at my mother-in-law. Her face remained unflinching, hardened even under verbal assault, briefly revealing weariness and resignation. "If you insist so strongly, Laura, then you should cover the repair costs. You have a lot of money, don't you?" "We don't have enough savings to fix this house." My mother-in-law retorted unexpectedly, leaving my sister-in-law at a loss for words. My eyes naturally compared my mother-in-law's worn-out apron with Laura's branded, flashy dress. My parents-in-law were already retired and living on a pension, while it was clear that my sister-in-law, despite her unclear job, had considerable income. The cost of repairing the family home should not be an issue for her. She had never lived independently, always staying at her parents' house. and now she was trying to push me out. Surely she should be the one to take care of the repairs. However, my sister-in-law firmly shook her head. I won't spend my money on such an old house. I absolutely don't want to do that. She said this with indifference, not giving any attention to us, and began to focus on her smartphone screen. While I was unsure about my next move, I stealthily observed my mother-in-law's expression. Would the difficulty be resolved immediately if I left the house? In the silence, it seemed like my mother-in-law and I were searching for what to say next. Then Laura, who had taken her eyes off her smartphone, looked at me, obviously displeased. Why are you still here? Get out quickly. I can't move my things in. It seemed impossible to convince my sister-in-law no matter the argument. When my mother-in-law looked at me, she murmured apologetically, "I'm sorry." Hearing those words, I nodded in acceptance. I had brought only a few belongings to my parents-in-law's house. I packed my minimal, essential clothing into a suitcase, crammed my daily necessities into a bag, and returned to the living room just as my husband came home and confronted my mother-in-law. After speaking to my husband and exchanging a few words, I left the house, leaving behind my mother-in-law's faint voice saying, "Sorry, both of you." My parents-in-law seemed unable to speak against my sister-in-law for some reason. As my husband muttered something while pulling the suitcase, I asked him a question, and he quietly answered, "Laura's actually the child of Dad's previous wife, and Dad feels guilty for separating her from her mother. Mom can't say anything because Laura is her stepdaughter. Nevertheless, it seems both of them are overly fearful of her." My husband's murmurings dissolved into the slowly darkening sky. I felt a snag in my heart, yet I could find no words to reply. Now, more than ever, I must consider our own living situation rather than that of my in-laws. We need to visit a real estate agent soon to find a new place to live. Desperately suppressing my sinking heart, I started discussing dinner plans with my husband in a bright tone. After spending a few days in a hotel following our departure from my in-laws' house, we were fortunate to find an apartment conveniently located between our workplaces and not far from my in-laws' house, allowing us to start a new life without the need for a major move. Half a year had passed since we left my in-laws' house. As planned, we left the apartment on our day off and headed to a specific location. In just a short 15-minute walk, a gleaming new house came into view. A few cars were neatly parked in the spacious driveway, and it seemed a barbecue was being held in the garden, which was partially visible from the street. Stepping onto the property unexpectedly, I spotted the person of interest at the center of the laughter and conversation. She noticed me and looked surprised. "Oh, it's you, Victoria," my sister-in-law said as she informed her friends of something, and then made her way through the crowd toward me. She was still dressed in flashy jewelry and an expensive dress, exuding the air of affluence. Standing before me, her demeanor shifted from the bright expression she had given her friends to a cold gaze as she looked down at me. "I don't remember inviting any poor people." "What? Did you come to search the garbage?" "No, I didn't come here with that intention." "Humph. It seems you can't become a proper adult without parents." I didn't respond to my sister-in-law but looked around instead, noticing her friends and acquaintances gathered in her new home, celebrating the housewarming. Although I hadn't received a formal invitation, my husband had learned about the party through her social media account and had informed me. After surveying the surroundings with a calm demeanor, I looked back at my sister-in-law. "Did you build this mansion, Laura?" I asked, to which she proudly replied, "Yes, it's a bit too big for just myself, but it's a spacious 3-room house for 2 generations. Maybe I should invite my boyfriend to live on the first floor." I secretly smiled to myself at her words. She was probably indulging in some distant dream. "What's wrong? Don't start laughing suddenly. It's creepy." My sister-in-law stared at me, puzzled by my smile. Her eyes held me as if looking at something unknown. Without breaking a smile, I revealed a fact to her. "Actually, this house is mine." My sister-in-law stopped in her tracks. "You must be mistaken," she said, tilting her head. I confidently reiterated that the house was indeed mine. Her complexion changed abruptly, turning red. What nonsense are you talking about? Stop joking. As expected, my sister-in-law attempted to argue back forcefully. Her loud voice caused some of the surrounding people to turn and look our way. My sister-in-law watched my next move with a somewhat embarrassed shrug of her shoulders. I took a document from my bag and presented it in front of her. Is this a deed? My sister-in-law stared at the document I presented. I pointed to a specific line in the document, and her gaze followed. At that moment, her facial expression twisted. My name was clearly written on that deed. The new house that my sister-in-law believed was hers was actually mine. After my parents passed away, I had saved almost all of the insurance money and inheritance I received. I had dreamed of building my own house since adulthood. Seeing the deterioration of my parents-in-law's house and their hardships, I decided that it was time to use that money. And I was determined that this house must not be taken by my sister-in-law. In fact, I financed and built this residence. However, you have been claiming it as your own without permission and even hosted a party here. Before I knew it, a crowd of curious onlookers had gathered around us, quietly watching the unfolding situation. The tension gradually escalated as people began to ask, "Isn't this house yours?" "Yes, it's my house." After all, the deed and the keys were in the house, my sister-in-law asserted strongly. That was meant to be given to your parents since we were planning to live together. Did you take the keys without permission? As I continued speaking, I regretted my carelessness for not having given the keys to my parents-in-law beforehand. I wondered why my sister-in-law did not realize that I was the one who had built the house, even though she must have seen the deed. Perhaps she had been indulging in the ideal fantasy of living there only with her parents. Have you been receiving money and valuables from your parents in this way until now? I asked sharply. My sister-in-law lost her words for a moment, looking stunned, but soon countered with an angry voice. Stop making such empty excuses. My parents were supporting me so that I wouldn't have to work. Isn't that what parents are supposed to do? I retorted with equal force. For your lavish lifestyle, the two of them cut back on food expenses and saved money. How do you think your friends would feel if they knew you were living the high life by depleting the savings of your parents, who are working hard and saving to the extreme? The crowd murmured, and the atmosphere changed completely. The relationships my sister-in-law had built on the foundation of money seemed to crumble audibly. According to my husband, who had shown me her social media, she claimed to be an investment expert and proudly displayed expensive cars, bags, and watches worth a month of my salary. Her circle consisted of celebrities and those pretending to be one. If it was revealed that her luxurious lifestyle was built on the extreme saving and precarious living of her parents. No, everyone. Everything this person is saying is a lie. My sister-in-law tried desperately to explain to the onlookers, but skeptical gazes gradually cornered her. There was no longer anyone who admired her. They left the garden one by one, heading back to their respective homes. Soon, only Laura and I were left in the vast garden. The savory smell of the barbecue melted into the silent air. She collapsed onto the ground, powerless. Then, hearing modest footsteps, I turned to see my parents-in-law standing with stern expressions. They glanced at the bright new house for a moment before looking down at my sister-in-law sitting on the ground. "We have spoiled you too much until now. From now on, you must stand on your own 2 feet and live on your own," said my father-in-law with weighty words. My sister-in-law seemed to look at them with tears, begging for help. "Aren't you two going to live in this house? Then give me the old house." "What am I supposed to do if I don't have a place to live?" Her desperate cry was drowned out by the sound of footsteps on the lawn, and then my husband appeared. As if seeing through my sister-in-law's heart, he stated matter-of-factly, "The house you grew up in has already been demolished, so there is no place for you to return. Apologize to Victoria and live here, or else you'll have to live independently." How can this be? In the end, my sister-in-law remained crouching in the garden, beginning to cry. However, her pride was too high to apologize to me. As expected, she continued to blame me but never asked to stay in the house. With no more assistance from her parents and being evicted from the demolished family home, she seemed lost. The only way for her to live independently was to work. But finding a job was difficult for her, who had never worked properly before. And according to my husband, she barely managed to get by with a live-in job at a hotel she had found. Later, she was seen visiting my parents-in-law and husband, begging for financial help. But my husband stated, "If you come here again, I will call the police." Her failure to apologize to me and ask for help might be seen as a sign of excessive pride. On the other hand, my parents-in-law offered to share the construction costs of the new house, but I declined. The house was built with the intention for us as a couple to live in. Their sentiment alone was enough for me. Still, my parents-in-law were adamant about offering financial support. After much deliberation, instead of accepting the money, I asked them to take care of our future child. At that time, I had just learned that I was pregnant. My parents-in-law were overjoyed at the news and wholeheartedly welcomed the addition to the family. My husband, knowing that our child's birth was imminent, became even more devoted to his work. This new house will proudly fulfill its duty as the final residence for my parents-in-law and as the place I can always return to.